Our 25th JBCC anniversary. 25 years is quite a very, very long time for somebody to exist. A child who was born 25 years ago is now at a position where they're able to look after themselves. So I hope, as it is expected for cognitive development. My name is Gilem Teto, and I'm going to be the program director for today. I am hoping that we will be able to make it on time, speak on time, and finish everything on time. And let me take this opportunity to do my protocols and my acknowledgement to the Minister of Human Settlements, Umama U Kensani Kubai, in absentia. I think she'll be joining us virtually. The Chair of the JBCC, Babu Kumasan. The board members of the JBCC, the member constituencies that are all represented here today. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. My name is Gilem Teto, as introduced. I'm also one of the board members representing the Black Business Council in the built environment, and I am going to be doing program directing for today. It is indeed an auspicious occasion that we are gathering in here today, as we'll be celebrating our 25 years. It's also going to be very important for us to take this time to reflect as a sector, as an industry in the built environment, to see where did we come from, where are we, and where do we go. Let me also take this opportunity to appreciate the support that we've always been receiving from member constituencies and the public at large, especially from the professionals and the players that are in the space. Because today we are having the JBCC that we are celebrating because of your contribution as stakeholders. So I would like to encourage you to continue to give us the support that you've been giving, to also give us the criticism that you've been given, so that we can be able to grow. Because without criticism, we may think that we're doing things right, meanwhile we're not necessarily doing things right. So we want to become a better version of ourselves at all times. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome on stage our chairman, Mr. Kumasan Tamburan, to come and give us the purpose of today and also give us the background of the JBCC from where we started to where we are. Can you just give him a round warm of applause?
Thank you. Thank you for attending. And I'm honored to be here today. And this is, needless to say, it's momentous. It's a huge milestone in the life of the JBCC. And the fact that the presence of well-wishers, industry leaders, and friends, colleagues have taken the time to share this with us is much appreciated. So thanks for that, and welcome. For many of you sitting here, the JBCC does not really need a formal introduction as such. The fact that you're here, you are aware of it, you are aware of its contribution, its presence in the built environment. But one thing that I want to elaborate on is actually the background of the JBCC. And some of you may have picked up on this. The JBCC has existed far longer than 25 years. And there are a few individuals sitting here that would know this. And it dates back to about 1984, I think, if the research I picked up on is correct. And the work of the JBCC started from the offshoot of the JCT, which is the Joint Contracts Tribunal, which you'll be aware of, UK-born, rebuy-influenced. And the real work started after the the contract that the JCT put out for our local environment was not suitable any longer. So a few individuals, prominent individuals in the built environment, got together, picked up on the work of the JCT, and carried it forward. And I think it was the 17th draft, if I'm not mistaken, of the JBCC contract that was, or the JCT, where the JCT left it off, that was actually published. And that was published in 1981. Up until this point, the JBCC was quite informal in terms of a gathering, and was led by individuals looking for a suitable construction contract for our local climate. And the JCT contracts were quite, well, we weren't ready for it. We kind of were still building up to that level. And it being UK based, that explains that. So 1991, the first publication. The JBCC was only formalized as a non-profit company in 1997, believe it or not. So it was quite informal for a long time, but doing a lot of work behind the scenes and led by contractors, specialist contractors, built environment professionals, which is made up of our industry at large, and all the constituents, engineers, quantity surveyors, played a huge role in the development of the JBCC and the finalization of the contract. So that is a kind of a brief background to where the JBCC came from, how it came about. In the days of Peter Bold, who started it, was very, very instrumental in making it what it is today. So 25 years, yes, because legally we've been around for 25 years as a registered non-profit company, but the existence dates back to about 1984, which makes us about 34 years old, 38 years old, thereabout. So, yeah, from humble beginnings and taking a truly South African-born product or brand and building it to what it is and making it suitable for our construction climate is an achievement in itself. And it served many of us sitting here today. Many of us have had some sort of experience with the JBCC over the years. And the core principles of where the JBCC came from and how it exists today was never lost, and was pretty much built on 4 pillars, really. And that was to portray a consensus view of all the constituents that form part of it. So, in other words, it was not biased. It was not impartial to any participant in it. To bring about standardization and good industry practice, which was good for the country in the construction sector, and bring about fair and equitable distribution of risk. And we know that, as soon as an agreement comes out, either 1 or 2 or more contracting parties is getting a short end of the stick. And this was not the intention. The intention was to create a fair and equitable contract suitable for all. And that talks to many contracts, many agreements. But the flaw in anything is, as soon as any individual is given an opportunity to administer a contract and that's not put in place and it's not done properly, that's probably the contract's biggest flaw, ill administration of that contract. And I think we've all been through that. We've all been through how the JBCC got a negative kind of connotation to it for being a contract that was not suitable. And largely, I think, all the case law that exists out there, it had a lot to do with, I'm not saying that the contracting parties were not at fault, but a lot of it came from poor or ill administration of that contract. And that agent not ensuring that the contracting parties are doing what they're supposed to do, or when they're supposed to do it, or timelessly doing what they're supposed to do. And I think that's what it's all about. I think it's about creating a fair contract and ensuring that it is administered to the best ability that it shows to the industry. The other thing is that we kind of pride ourselves in is that the contract was ever changing because the industry changed. It changed continuously, and the contract had to adapt. Not so long ago, and I think it was probably at the release of 6.2 that I'm sure you're aware of, we finally got an endorsement from the CIDB for the use of the contracts in the public sector, which for us was something that we kind of tried to achieve for many years, probably more than a decade. We tried to do that, and there were things that came about. Treasury started to draw up their own construction contract. And many things came in, and it had to do with individuals in the industry and wanting different things for the public sector. But we finally got that endorsement, and I think that was a real achievement for the JBCC as a brand, as a South African brand. And I think we should all be proud of that. And going in from there, I mean, just adapting the previous JBCC, or the 6.1, to the 6.2 and getting the endorsement meant that we had to incorporate a lot of the state contract data into it. I don't know, there's many people sitting in the room that have only encountered edition 5 because it's kind of bulletproof. All the QSs have done all the preliminaries on it and it's all good to go. But I think we've come a long way from that. Public sector still uses edition 4, believe it or not. To this day, still available, they still use it. So we can't remove it from the suite. It's still there, it's still being used. Private sector is still using edition 5. So for us, the fact that probably a good 6 or 7 years worth of work has gone into edition 6.2 means that it's refined to the point that it's fit for purpose. And that means that it's ready for use. And our encouragement is for the entire industry to kind of move on to using 6.2. And in doing that, what it will tell us is what the shortcomings of that contract is. Because for us getting to where we are, the use of every contract allowed us to get to that point where we found out what the shortcomings were and fixed it and moved on. And I think that's important. So personally, I encourage you to use it. A lot of time and effort has gone into it. And going on from there, I think it's important. I think with where we are in the digital age, we want the agreements to be accessed by all using it on an online platform. I think COD is here today, and they've come a long way with the JBCC. and it dates back to, Adrian, what's that? How many years? 2000. So that's a long time. It's a long history that the agreements were available online. And that is one of our persistent aims, to move to a paperless future. It's the responsible thing to do. And in doing that, the online platform has been refined to the point that it is a seamless transition between paper. You can print out an agreement, but the fact that the entire agreement can be populated digitally, online, allows for collaboration, that for me is merit in itself. So I encourage that. Whilst there's still a large part of our users that actually still wants a hard copy. And it will phase out over time, but when you're dealing with the public sector, it's difficult for that transition because the mechanisms for the use of the online platform does not exist there. But we're working on it, and it will soon go in that direction. So we will be completely paperless with our contracts or our suite of documents. I'm not going to go into what the suite is. I think you are aware of it. You're aware of, the thing about creating agreements and creating contracts and things like that is telling people how to use it, encouraging the use of it and telling them how to use it, how to administer it. And that's one thing we can be proud of. There's been a Q&A thing that's been going on for many, many years where the most well-versed users of it get caught out by something that is extraordinary, that they're experiencing in a contract, and how do you deal with it? So, like any other contract, I think if the contracting parties are not able to sit and talk about how do we move forward without any party being compromised, is the way to deal with these things. And COVID has taught us that. We were inundated in the last 2 or 3 years with queries on how to administer the JBCC over this period. We were not faced with it previously. Some employers were extremely hard on contractors in dealing with it. But the fact that we didn't deal with it previously, it was a new thing. But a lot of guidance was put out into the industry, and some people took it for what it was and followed the advice that was given. And we're back on track. I think COVID is still lingering, but what it's taught us to do is rethink how we do things so that it's not static and it is malleable and flexible so that it doesn't allow a project to suffer, but rather both contracting parties to benefit from that contract being signed. So I think I've gone over my time. I've only had 5 minutes, but yeah, because I tend to talk too much. But I think for me the important thing is we're here to celebrate a milestone, and we're here to consider the next 25 years and beyond, and all we've done in the last year was thought about where we've come from, what we've done over the years, and that talks to the veracity of what the JBCC is and what it stands for and why it should continue, why its work should continue. So I think it's that. Where do we go from here? And it's quite simple for me. We need to get better and greater than where we are currently and be a progressive organization going forward. Thank you.
Can we give him another round of applause? Thank you very much. It's very difficult to tell your boss to get off stage because it can become very career limiting. On the other hand, you've got another boss waiting in the lobby to actually get his time to speak. Thank you very much, Kumasen, for that background that you've given about the JBCC, its inception and where it is today. It is quite a long journey and it could be very difficult for you to do it within 5 minutes. Hence, I was graceful and giving you a bit of more time. But amongst other things that you have mentioned is that actually the JBCC is more than 25 years old because it was established around 1984 or so. And over the years, it has seen a lot of evolution because it is the JBCC that has taken the built environment and the construction sector from being an informal sector towards being a professional sector in a way through the contracts that we are currently boasting. Our appreciation also goes to the professionals that have started at the beginning and have taken us to where we are today in growing the JBCC to become the brand of choice that it is today. But above all, it is one of those proud moments where we can be able to boast as South Africa about our own South African contract that is meant for the South African market. And therefore, we need to support it because it is quite well received and supported in other countries. I've mentioned the issue of one of the achievements that we have done at the JBCC is to have the inclusion of the contractors as a member constituency. Because in the olden days, it used only to be the professionals, but above all, it was an all-boys club. So today I'm standing here as the member of the BBCP, as a member constituency representing the contractors. And I'm proud to say I was the first female to be admitted to become a board member of the JBCC. So well done to the JBCC. We thank you for acknowledging and appreciating transformation. All right, moving right ahead. Refilo, I can't see you. Are we all set for the minister? Are we? All right. Thank you very much. Our next speaker does not need much of introduction, but because we need to observe protocol and we also need to appreciate Black excellence, I am going to go through her bio. Her name is Mamuluko Nkensani Kubai, and she is the Minister of Human Settlements and a Member of Parliament of the Republic of South Africa. She is the co-chairperson of the Economic Sectors, Employment and Infrastructure Development Cluster, a member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC, and the current chairperson of the Economic Transformation Subcommittee. Before her current role, she served as a minister in 5 portfolios: tourism, science and technology, communications, and energy. She also acted as a minister of health at the height of COVID-19 pandemic. Academic qualifications: she holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Johannesburg, formerly known as the Vista, a postgraduate diploma in project management from Demelin College, a master's degree in public and development management from University of the Witwatersrand, and completed a program for leadership development at Harvard Business College. She is currently pursuing her PhD in state-owned enterprises and corporate governance at the University of Johannesburg. Career position, membership and other activities. Mekubai started her career as community developer in the non-governmental sector and subsequently joined the financial sector at First National Bank as skills development specialist. Later, she worked in the business banking division at Nedbank. She joined the public sector as a skills development facilitator at the National Health Laboratory Services. She was then recruited to become a director in the office of the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Ms. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. She later became the parliamentary advisor to the then Deputy President of South Africa, Mr. Kgalema Motlanthe. As a leader, Kubai serves as a chairperson of Transport Portfolio Committee at the City of Johannesburg Council. In 2009, she became a member of Parliament, assuming several roles, including acting Deputy Chief Whip of the ANC and chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Telecommunications and Postal Services. Kubai served a full term of 2019 as a member of the Global Artificial Intelligence Council, established by the World Economic Forum Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. As part of the council, she and other global leaders provided strategic guidance to the international community on priorities for artificial intelligence, machines, learning governance, cooperation, and shaping global policy development. In 2020, Kubai joined other global leaders as a member of the Forum's Global Future Council on Sustainable Tourism, a multi-stakeholder knowledge network tasked to advance innovative thinking for a more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable future. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we give a round of applause for Minister who's joining us virtually, and not because she's undermining our program, but she had another clashing program. As we know that there is that midterm budget review in Parliament today, and she had to go and report there. But despite that, she made the effort. Minister, over to you, and thank you so much for making the time. A round of applause for the Minister, please.
Thank you very much, Kele. As Program Director, Ms. Mteto. Let me acknowledge Mr. Tamburan, Chairperson of the JBCC. Acknowledge Mr. Hole, Deputy Chairman of the JBCC. Acknowledge Mr. Sin, Chief Executive Officer of the JBCC. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you. I am very pleased to join you, though it's virtually, as Kelly has said, that we do have medium-term budget policy statement this afternoon. So all of us are in Cape Town as members of Parliament. I do apologize not being there physically. I would have loved to be there with you. This morning, as you celebrate your 25th anniversary in the built environment sector, this is a significant milestone, and I would like to join you. I would like to congratulate you in the celebration and acknowledging this milestone. As an NGO or non-profit organization with a committee that is representative of building owners and developers, professional consultants, and general and specialist contractors, you are very critical stakeholders for the Department of Human Settlements and the sector in general, but more importantly within the construction sector. The construction industry is a significant contributor to employment and growth in South Africa. We have to work together to revive the construction industry, which has been a slum or on a slum since the completion of the World Cup infrastructure. We've lost quite a lot of skills and a lot of companies, but more importantly, we've lost in terms of our edge within this in contribution to the GDP. You have asked me to speak to you about the important issue of the implementation of the new urban agenda. The new urban agenda, as you know, is a globally shared vision for a better and more sustainable future for the people within equitable and inclusive cities. In brief, the new urban Sorry, I'm not so sure if I'm still there. You managed to get me? I'm seeing it says recording again. Can you hear me, Kelly?
Yes, I can hear you, but we need to see your photo. Please switch on the video.
My sincere apologies. I hope you can hear me. I just saw that it had a bit of a cut, so I hope it's not too far. What I was raising is that you have asked me to speak specifically on the issue of the implementation of the new urban agenda. And the new urban agenda, as you know, is a globally shared vision for a better and more sustainable future for people within equitable and inclusive cities. In brief, the new urban agenda lays out standards and principles for the planning, construction, development, management, and improvement of urban areas along its 5 main pillars of implementation: national urban policies, urban legislation and regulation, urban planning and design, local economy and municipal finance, and local implementation, as the pillars are just reflected. 2 weeks ago, ladies and gentlemen, as South Africa, we hosted the ED UN Habitat, Ms. Maimuna Maud Sharif, together with other ministers from the continent. Others joined us virtually because we had the hybrid version of a conference, who came into South Africa, and others followed to the development virtually, to launch the Global Action Plan Framework on Informal Settlements and Slums. The intention of the Global Action Plan Framework is to take coordination, collaboration, commitments, and partnership to the next level. It consolidates and amplifies efforts for accelerating the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and the new urban agenda in the decade of action. It provides a joint vision to inform actions framed by partnerships and is the basis for member states to elevate commitments in form of resolution to the pledge in the UN Habitat Assembly processes. There is a recognition globally that we are running out of time with regards to the achievements of the SDG 11 to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. This is happening in a context which urbanization is rising rapidly and cities are becoming centers of social ills and health risks as more and more people are relegated into slums and informal settlements. Each country is expected to localize the new urban agenda, and once adopted by the General Assembly, the Global Action Plan Framework on Informal Settlements and Slums. Although the envisaged outcomes of these programs are expected to be the same everywhere, how they are implemented will be determined by the conditions that are prevalent in each country. It is estimated that estimated that 1 billion global slum dwellers exist, and this, in terms of that, the 238 million are in the sub-Saharan Africa. For us in the country, we know that we continuously have almost 2,600 informal settlements, and we are saying 1.4 million households are in these informal settlements, and we continue to say this number grows. Africa's population is projected to double between now and 2050, and 2/3 of this growth will be absorbed by urban areas. In our country in 2021, over 67.85% of South Africans' total population lived in urban areas and cities. More than 23% of urban dwellers are estimated to live in informal settlements. In South Africa, we have to tackle the challenge of rapid urbanization in a context of a history of apartheid, whose pattern of development was the exclusion of the majority from the cities through social and economic exclusion and spatial segregation. It is within this context that South Africa has formulated its national urban policies, urban legislation and regulations, urban planning and design. Further to this, South African cities are growing and expanding in a manner that reinforces class and racial segregation, with rapidly sprouting informal settlements across the country. It means that our intervention has to be decisive in breaking the spinal cord of the apartheid spatial development and expanding social and economic participation opportunities. The UN Habitat 3 Pretoria Declaration on Informal Settlements upgrading, signed in South Africa in 2016, recognizes that informal settlements challenges must be tackled through an integrated approach to sustainable urban development and taking into account the national policy framework, legal, financial resources, and special issues. Our country, through an inclusive process, has made tremendous progress in implementing this policy, and our approach includes the following steps. We started by identifying and verifying informal settlements in the country, gathering real-time data, monitoring the growth patterns so that we could get a better understanding and therefore be able to do the planning, but also the extent of the challenge we are faced with. Presently, as I said, we've got about 2,600 informal settlements that accommodates 1.4 million households, according to Statistics South Africa, in terms of their estimates. And because we see most of this coming up in terms of illegal occupation of land, we always say that it's growing. We completed a baseline assessment of informal settlements whereby we defined variables for monitoring and evaluating these informal settlements. We have established provincial forums on urban upgrading of informal settlements in all 9 provinces of our country. The forum facilitates alignment of upgrading processes with all municipalities and monitor progress in implementation, as well as knowledge exchange with various stakeholders in each province. To entrench an understanding of informal settlement upgrading among practitioners and public representatives, we have developed a 13-module course called Introduction to Informal Settlement Upgrading that unpacks the critical processes required for undertaking informal settlements upgrading. We are also rolling out intensive capacity development programs to all our provinces, municipalities, civil organizations, and communities. Again, the majority of our informal settlements have access to services. Moreover, municipalities have implemented various methods of security of tenure, such as a letter of occupation to informal settlements dwellers, so that they are able to have an opportunity to engage in economic activities and trenches as well government's commitment to the dignity of South Africa. We have established our community of practice to engage with our civil society, academia, and share good practice and exchange knowledge and disseminate information. I'm raising this because if we are to understand the issue of new urban agenda, we've got to understand that the importance of this, as we see the growth within cities and the urban areas, will be in terms of development, as being able to deal with the issues of informal settlements in the country, and ensuring that people who are in these informal settlements are profiled properly and are able to move in the areas and live within the major areas that we are talking about, in terms of ensuring that we give them dignity. Our vision strives for the establishment of viable, socially and economically integrated communities, situated in areas that allow convenient access to economic opportunities, health, education, social amenities, and to which all South Africans people will be able to have access to in terms of progressive basis, but also which we will be able to address what I called the special, apartheid special development, where you found majority of the South Africans were staying in the margins of the economy, but also with no services. It is with this that JBCC has a critical role to play in helping us to achieve the action of the new urban agenda and also the Global Action Plan framework on informal settlements and slums. More specifically, you have to help us to reimagine our cities and create new cities to accommodate the growing numbers of urban dwellers. As part of our deliberation in this conference, you have to help us answer the questions: what is that we need to do as a country to accelerate the implementation of the new urban agenda, especially in relation to the upgrading of informal settlements, but more importantly, seeing the opportunities that exist in terms of our housing, social housing policy and program. It is within this context that we should be able to accelerate a number of opportunities that we create for people to have access to decent shelter, but also number of ensuring that majority of South Africans can have access to what we call even human rights basic services. It has to be something of the past where we find our communities, or even within the informal settlements, people who do not have access to water nor sanitation. Because we do believe that if this continues, it does temper in terms of their human rights, and it actually violates what the Constitution has enforced and said to us we must be able to do. So with this, I do hope that as we work together as South Africans in terms of various responsibilities, but more importantly from our side as government, understanding and accepting and vocally saying, and more in terms of practical action, that we are not able to solve this problem alone as government. We need you as partners, we need you as stakeholders to join hands with us, be able to find this lasting solution, work together in partnership, and be able to create safer communities, but more importantly, resilient cities. I wish you all the best in terms of your deliberation, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to address you, and sincerely apologize having to address you virtually, but also being able not to keep my video on throughout the address. Thank you very much.
Another warm round of applause for Minister Kubai. Looking beautiful as always. Thank you so much for showing up once again. I'm not sure if you're going to have time, but we need about 5 or 10 minutes. We'll just take a few questions, especially because you touched on a very, very important aspect, talking about the UN Habitat Agenda, SDG 11. So I'm going to allow this opportunity before I sum up to see if are there any hands, any 1 or 2 questions that we can take for the minister. Going once. Oh, there's one hand. Is there another hand? All right. So you're the only person that can ask questions now because we all slept on it. All right. Can you please just introduce yourself, your name and the
My name is Chris Bennington. I'm Director of the Association of Arbitrators. May I ask what the timetable is for the rollout of this very ambitious program and when you anticipate the necessity to provide a foundation by way of construction contract platforms to assist with this rollout?
Thank you very much, Minister.
Are you only taking this one, or you take everybody else and then I answer all of them?
There was only one, but I see now that my stalwart is just raised, so I cannot ignore the stalwart. Dr. Paul?
Thank you. Good morning, Minister, and thanks for embracing us. Paul Khole from JBCC. Now, from what you are saying, Minister, it's as if you were with us in 2017 when Deputy Minister Jeremy Cronin addressing the CBE transformation agenda. And one of the things he said was that in order to address the spatial patterns of the past regime, we needed to get in the town planners, land surveyors, and so forth and so forth. Now, I'm just keen to know as to, from your side, how far are you with that process? Because I'm aware that that process to get the town planners and the land surveyors in the construction industry, be included. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stalwart. Is there another one? Okay. That will be it, Minister. Just those 2 questions, please.
No, thank you very much for the questions. Let me start with Chris. In terms of the matter around the timetable, we have started, and maybe I must explain, part of the phase 1, we've categorized the informal settlements in terms of the work around phases, where you have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. The major issue that we have picked up now that we are trying to remove as a hurdle, or what we can call red tape, is within local government. The planning unit, I've been engaging SALGA to try and change that so that we can, if you look at the informal settlements, what takes long for us
Maybe you want to switch off your camera just for these questions, Minister, because we can hardly hear you.
Have informal settlements upgrade taken up by the planning in the local government, because we need them to declare, and the colleagues who are there. I was saying that the major issue around the time frame is we currently have started, so it's on phases. Massive construction or massive upgrades across the country is around municipalities, where the planning or the stages where declaration of these informal settlements are done takes longer. So we depend on them. So we've been engaging on with SALGA to try and turn around the situation and turn around the time to reduce. Each year we set the target, but for the infrastructure specifically that deals with social housing, we've now brought in infrastructure fund and DPSA. And this in terms of plan, for the coming 3 years, would want to accelerate with more than 75% of what it originally was going to be over a 10-year period. In Northern Cape and Eastern Cape, we're also taking the approach in terms of front loading. We're hoping, crossing our fingers, that's why I'm here in Cape Town today, that the Minister of Finance will announce today the framework. If that can be done, then we'll know that we'll be able to take the financial commitment for a 3-year period, bring it forward to a financial year, which meaning that from the 1st of April next year, we can be able to implement what we would have been implementing in the 3-year period. That would assist us in fast-tracking, for example, social, what we call social housing in the work that we're doing. So in terms of time, I hope Chris have answered. So you would have various timetable and time frames per phases of the informal settlements and per phases of the work that you are doing per province, depending on how we get the approvals in terms of the development approval or planning approvals within the municipalities. And then in terms of what Paul has raised, what we are doing it through the issue of bringing everybody into play, because we have acknowledged as government over time that we do not have the capacity. So that's why we brought in DBSA and Infrastructure Fund to be the ones that leads in terms of our work in the human settlement space, but more being able to round up per program the necessary skills that we have done. What also additional done, but specifically now it is around capacity. Then we contract based on consultants to be able to plug them into the municipalities. That work continues regularly, where we issue bids for those who are willing to come join us as consultants, and also in terms of panels for services that we do, and we consistently utilize them to be able to help us in various. So that work has already started. For example, now we're dealing with the title deeds rollout and fast tracking of that. We've been able to bring in quantity surveyors because we had called, that closed in April this year. We called on various professionals to come, and then we have a panel of them. So we appoint them various times in terms of municipalities. Recently, that deals with almost around 15,000 title deeds in Tshwane. That links to Putatswana government, which was the old apartheid government. And that's why we would be able to appoint those, and we've done that already. So I'm not so sure if I'm answering what you are asking specifically, but it's in phases based on the projects, and we have already started implementing that. So that's why we call on various professionals to plug them into municipalities, into provinces, into various work, both as companies, but also as individual consultants to assist us in the work. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Minister, once again. Unfortunately, Chris, we've run out of time, and I need to also let the Minister go. But before we let you go, Minister, thank you so much for once again giving us your time and squeezing us in between your busy schedule. Today, I'm glad because you're addressing the correct cohort of people that are in the professional sector and also contractors that are in the built environment. And we will be waiting. I'm sure we will not be having this conversation with you for the very last time, but we are definitely going to invite you some more, because we would like to become part of the solution of this country instead of being part of the problems. So we wish you all of the best in your running in the race of becoming the Deputy President of the ANC. And thank you very much for always availing yourself to speak to us. We appreciate your support, and definitely in this house, you've got our support. So you'll hear from us very soon. Thank you. We would like to let you go. Can we just say thank you to the Minister with a warm round of applause, ladies and gents. And thank you very much. This is the kind of leadership that we need. Not people that will give us excuses of why they cannot be able to address us and answer the questions that we have. All right, we are moving right ahead with our program, ladies and gentlemen. And I will not be going into the summary of what the Minister has said because of time. I just want us to make up for the lost time. We are now moving straight to session 2, where we're going to be discussing the future of building contracts. And the person that's going to be moderating our session is our one and only Deputy Chairperson of the JBCC, and he's my stalwart, Ntate Paul Khole, who is going to be moderating the session. Please join me on stage, sir. Amongst the panelists, we have got the Chief Executive of the JBCC, Mr. Rakesh. Please do join us in the stage. Mr. Rakesh is our CEO. He holds a BProc LLM currently. Rakesh has 20 years experience as an admitted attorney and is a member of the Society of Construction Law for Africa. He is also a facilitator for the SACITA. He gained valuable practical experience during his elsewhere employment in the public sector regarding legislation that governs state procurement and processes relating to infrastructure development. He has vast work knowledge in the areas of contract and construction law, governance, risk, and compliance. Sondela. Thank you. Next to join us on stage is Mr. Clifford Hayim. Clifford Hayim is a registered valuer, MRICS and SACQSP, and practicing quantity surveyor with a master's degree in building. He's an associate member of the Association of Arbitrators, internal examiner and lecturer to honors and MSc students at the School of Construction Economics and Management at the University of Witwatersrand. Also a RICS assessor, course convener at the University of Cape Town. He is a director of contracts on demand, managing director of Farah Hayim, is a practicing firm quantity surveyor. He has a practicing firm of quantity surveyors, the developer of the KWI QuickFis financial feasibility software used in the built environment industry since 1995, also the developer of the eCloud construction suite of electronic productivity services, including eProxa, eJBCC, and a host of other electronic services. Please do join us, Clifford. A round of applause for Clifford, ladies and gents. Our next panelist is Advocate Perry Rousseau. Perry is the chairman of Association of Arbitrators, Southern Africa. He is a practicing advocate and was appointed senior counsel on December 6, 2006. Pierre has held several appointments as an acting judge of the High Court. His practice is focused on adjudications and arbitrations. A round of applause for him, please. Last but not least, on the panelists, we have got Advocate Eric Dunn. Eric was admitted to the bar in March 1981 and took silk in December 1992. He is currently a member of the Maysels Group of Advocates and a senior member of the Johannesburg Society of Advocates. Eric currently serves on the JSA Professional and Fees Committee. He is an active fellow of the Association of Arbitrators Southern Africa, NPC, and is the editor of the Association of Arbitrators Southern Africa. NPC's bi-monthly e-periodical, Arbitrary Speaking. He is also a member of the Society of Construction Law for Africa. In 2017, he successfully completed the advanced course in business rescue practice, equivalent to a postgraduate qualification in this field, through the University of South Africa, under the auspices of Law Society of South Africa. His fields of practice include arbitration law, construction and engineering law, contract law, administrative law, company law, insolvency law, law relating to medical schemes and healthcare, property law, public-private partnership, and tax law. Oh, I had a Zuma moment there. He was also a member of the Income Tax Board for 2 terms in the mid-90s. He has appeared in many prominent cases, featuring in at least 46 reported judgments in the High Court, Supreme Court of Appeal, and in the Constitutional Court. He has appeared in the case of Botswana High Court. He has also acted as a High Court judge on numerous occasions. Another round of applause for our advocates. As you can see, we've got a number of learned friends that are going to be discussing with us As it is, it shows you that our contract agreements are not just a ntete focus tswana. They are just not a makeshift kind of contracts, but they are contracts that have been thought through and that have got information that is contained in them. Over to you, Ntate Paul.
Is it good morning or is it? Oh, good morning. Hey, this COVID thing has really done things to us. And I think, yeah, good morning, everybody. And let me acknowledge the chair of the board, Kumasan, the board members, the presidents who are here, and especially one of our biggest constituency member, MBSA, the brand new president, I call him Styles. And then, of course, I've seen the CEOs of what used to be called SASI. It's now called Caesar. Chris is here. I know it does not, like that, And I was quite worried, program director, that we don't seem to have youth, but I see a few of them here. And I really want to also acknowledge them and welcome them and say this is the future. Now, I don't want to spend too much time. A whole lot of comments has been made by both the director of program and the chairperson. Before we start, I've just coined a phrase which I've basically developed over a number of years when I had the opportunity to sit on the technical committee of the JBCC. And I was quite privileged to sit with, what I call the most stalwarts, people with silver gray hair. I remember when I was, 50 or something, and I said to the board then to say, this is my birthday, and one of my, the chairperson, Sten Siegel, said, "Oh, you're so young, man." And he was commented by, Brian Prisgrove as well. So, I think it's been very important that we had this body of information and wisdom and knowledge, and we are very privileged that some of them are still alive and still sharing with us there today. I coined this thing, a program director, called PPS. Now, those of you who have been in this industry, when you talk about PPS, we talk about that provident society, professional provident society. So, but for the purpose of this, I coined this thing called PPS, Peace, Progress, and Success. And my note is that for the construction industry or the built environment, whichever you call it, to grow and remain healthy, the parties on the project must always, and I think it's very important, the chair did mention that, must always exercise their rights in terms of the contract. This is one of the famous discussions that we have. George likes that, as well as we talk. And, the state of the industry today is what it is because many parties don't exercise their rights in terms of the contract. And, the contract has been designed in such a way that you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. If you are asked to do work, additional work, through a contract instruction or site instruction, whatever, the contract tells you to say, if that instruction comes, what is it that you need to do as a contractor? The same when you have to do certain work as a principal agent. The contract will say, the principal agent shall, or the principal agent must. Now, we've had a situation where, for instance, a lot of advocates will tell you that the reason why we have so many problems, again, is because with all due respect, our principal agents are not really filling in the document correctly. The chairman was lamenting here about the poor implementation of the of the JBCC. It's not because the JBCC is not a good contract, simply because the principal agent are not doing what they should be doing. I mean, in terms of filling basic information like your contract start date, penalties, etc. Once you go to arbitration, even to court, those are the first things that the lawyers will then start making money. You know, what is the start date of this thing and so forth. Now, on the score, can I then ask to, I don't know how we're going to do this, whether we can do it sitting there, colleagues, or you want to be on the stage. I think I'll be guided by you. Okay. Okay. Oh, you've got the mics there. Okay. Then maybe let's start with Rakesh. You've already been introduced. Perhaps you can just give us a short synopsis of, you know, what you see the future of the contracts be, you know, taking into account where we are and then where, you know, we should be going. Rakesh.
Thank you, Ntate Paul. In fact, I've prepared a presentation, and do you think that we should just kick into the program and address those topics? Thank you. All protocols observed. Good morning to our Honorable Minister who addressed us, Minister Kubai, Chairperson of the JBCC, Mr. Kumas and Tamburan, Ntate Paul Khole, board members of the JBCC, constituent members, distinguished guests, and users of the JBCC contracts. Good morning, welcome for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. And without further ado, let me get into my topic for today. Where are we headed with the JBCC documents? A comparison of the edition 6.1 of the Principal Building Agreement and edition 6.2. And let's see if my presentation can, there we go. So, JBCC is basically a contract, right? It's a tool that is to be used in the built environment, especially with construction contracts. So here I have a cartoon. It doesn't matter how many resources you have. If you don't know how to use them, it'll never be enough. So there we have our contracts that are being bought and used in industry, and there's a lack of proper contract management, as alluded to by my chairperson, that we do not manage the contract on an ongoing basis. We have principal agents that in most cases are ill-equipped from a knowledge point of view as to how to manage the contract. And what happens is we find that the contract is stowed away somewhere and taken out only, you know, when there's a dispute or disagreement between the parties. The JBCC contract is structured in such a way that at every phase, every step of the way, it allows the parties that equitable risk, you know, distribution of risk in terms of the contract, how to manage the contract, what is expected in terms of rights, obligations, etc. of the parties, being the employer, who's the principal agent is representing the employer, and downstream we have your main contractor and your subcontractors. So the point is, if you do not know how to manage this contract, you will be at a loss. So, it's a standard form of contract that is endorsed by the Construction Industry Development Board. You know, it is for building work only. It's administered by a principal agent with full authority and obligation to act. So the employer's agents do the design, the exception being with specialist subcontractors. The limits of liability are defined in the Principal Building Agreement and our other agreements in terms of the insurance clauses. Risk is carried by the party best suited to deal with it. In other words, once let's say the contractor has been given the site handover certificate, is now on site, you will have your suppliers coming and delivering goods and materials on site. So in that regard, the risk of a supplier or a third party being injured on site would be carried by the contractor. However, the insurances will be held in both the employer and the contractor's name. It recognized nominated and selected subcontractors, claims for time, extension of time and or money. There are defined procedures with time limitation clauses, and if you do not do it within that time, you lose your claim. There are standard certificates and guarantee forms, contract data forms, and then Cliff later will tell you about our electronic service from contracts on demand. You know, the future of the JBCC, we have this foresight of probably being totally electronic, reducing our carbon footprint, going into the future. As I've mentioned, it complies with the CIDB standard for uniformity. There are 4 contracts that the CIDB has endorsed: the GCC, FIDIC, the NEC, and our JBCC contract. Obviously, our JBCC contract has its space in the market in terms of construction. Then it uses bold type format for terms that are defined. Right. The Joint Contracts Tribunal always tried to keep, the contracts up to date, and it was a priority. Hence the issue back historically of some 18 loose leaf amendments to the 1980 standard form of building contract, before it was superseded by the 1998 edition. Clearly, to many of today's users, large numbers of loose leaf amendments would be unacceptable. That is why the JCT now publishes revised editions of contracts on a more regular basis. Consolidation avoids that particular problem, but may also frustrate some users. Why? Because we are always coming out with a new edition and a new edition. As alluded to, the state still uses edition 4.1 of the JBCC contract. We are trying, and we are working on it. Progress has been made to so-called convert state to use the latest edition of our principal building agreement, being edition 6.2. So what is different? Now, if you do not update, if we do not, listen to what industry has to say, we've got, our constituent members representing the professions in industry, and we get our nuances from industry. And so, therefore, there are these changes. Change is the only constant, as it has been said. And this cannot be avoided unless progress comes to a halt. Our JBCC suite, as our users are familiar with, consists of what you see there on this slide. Our Principal Building Agreement, Edition 6.2, May 2018. The Nominated and Selected Subcontract Agreement, also 6.2, May 2018. These 2 contracts dovetail one another in terms of the clauses contained therein. The Minor Works Agreement, Edition 5.2, is the latest edition, May 2018. The Small and Simple Works Contract, Edition 1, May 2020, which was one of our latest additions to our suite. And the Direct Contractors Contract, Edition 1 as well, which is one of our latest additions as well to the JBCC suite. Then we have our General Preliminaries and our Contract Data, CD, abbreviated as CD. In terms of the Principal Building Agreement, the Nominated and Selected Subcontract Agreement, and the Minor Work Agreement, the Contract Data are separate documents. And for the for the Small and Simple Works Contract and the Direct Contractors Contract, the contract data forms part of the contract itself. And then we have various support documentation as well, which you can get on our website, downloadable free of charge, as well as practice notes. So as I've mentioned, the JBCC document is for building work only. It's administered by the principal agent with full authority and obligation to act. Employees, agents do the design. The exception is with the specialist subby. Limits of liability are defined specifically in terms of the insurance clauses. It recognizes nominated and selected subcontractors. Claims for extension of time and/or money are defined procedures, or you lose your claim. And standard certificates and guarantee forms, contract data forms, are also available as support documentation. And we have our electronic service. Now, I would like to go through basically the high-level differences in terms of our edition 6.2 of the Principal Building Agreement and 6.1. This is not exhaustive, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I've been allocated 25 minutes, and hopefully, we can do justice in terms of these differences. Okay, the first difference, I've prepared another paper, obviously. Let me open to that, and I will go through that from here. If you will just bear with me. Thank you. Now, as I've mentioned, there have been changes, and these changes are not, in terms of industry, people will ask why these changes all of the time. And some people are under the misapprehension that these changes are because the JBCC wants to have or host another seminar or webinar and get people to come and attend just because of these changes. No, these changes are nuances, in terms of what we experience in industry. And this is how we get our feedback. And times have changed. And, the South African climate always is, changing. We have, as mentioned by the Minister, government needs to invest more in infrastructure. We need to stimulate the economy. We have the Infrastructure Development Act, which also mentions, strategic infrastructure projects. However, that act does not even have the regulation. So, in my opinion, it's a dog without teeth. They are trying to bite, but cannot get that chunk out of there. Investing in infrastructure stimulates the economy. It also creates jobs. In our present, economic situation in the country, this is what is needed. And as the JBCC, although we are providing the documentation for the projects, these projects need to be lifted off the ground. And that is where we see ourselves coming in as one of the 4 endorsed agreements in South Africa, and proudly South African. We need to stimulate. We need to also play our part, as a provider, not only as a provider of contracts and training, but to ensure that government buys in to the work that we are doing, and we synergize with government and try to stimulate the built environment. All right. In terms of the differences, why the differences, and what are the salient differences that we have experienced or have encountered in terms of edition 6.1 and 6.2? The first thing was the definition of the word agreement. The concern was that in edition 6.1, agreement, the defined term agreement is used to extend. The definition of agreement in JBCC 6.1 is as follows. Agreement. The JBCC Principal Building Agreement and the completed JBCC PBA, which is a Principal Building Agreement contract data. The defined term agreement is used extensively throughout the Principal Building Agreement. The contract data, and thus also in Bill number 1, preliminaries. The definition of agreement should consider that there may be documents other than the Principal Building Agreement and the contract data which should be included in the agreement, even if not specifically listed in the contract data. Last minute, post-tender annexes should also be within the broader definition of agreement. So the agreed changes was the definition related to the above mentioned concern in JBCC 6.2 have been changed as follows. Agreement. The completed JBCC Principal Building Agreement and JBCC contract data, the contract drawings, the priced document, and any other documents reduced to writing and signed by the authorized representatives of the parties. As a result, the definition of contract documents was deleted. The edition 6.1 definition of contract documents is repeated herein also for convenience. Contract documents, this agreement, the contract drawings, the priced documents, and other identified documents. The definition of price document has changed to include preliminaries as follows. Price documents, the document incorporating quantities and or rates used in the compilation of the contract sum, such as bills of quantities, preliminaries, and schedules of rates. So in terms of agreement, previously it just included the document itself, the principal building agreement, and the contract data. So we find that, lawyers will be familiar with this. The terms of the contract cannot be changed in terms of the written word within the 4 pages, within the 4 corners of the page. But on site you will find that there are contract instructions which may change the scope of work. Now, in the past, there were sort of disputes as to whether the contractor must accept contract instructions or site instructions. And then we had disputes, as alluded to by Ntate Paul. So the contract itself, which manages the project, if you change a term or a clause in the contract, then parties must agree to it. It cannot be done unilaterally and accept it. There's a difference between a contract instruction where, for example, the employer wants to change the corrugated roof to a tiled roof. Now that is a contract instruction which is now part of the definition of agreement. So these are the nuances that come out of industry, which gives the JBCC the impetus to make these changes. Lately we have just reconstituted the drafting committee and the review committee, and there are subcommittees of the board which have been mandated to sort of consider, in terms of the drafting committee, to consider changes that are going to be made to the principal building agreement or any of our suite of agreements. And you have the review panel that reviews any such changes and reports back to the constituents who go back to industry. Because why these changes are not done also, in terms from a JBCC point of view, ad whim, ad fancy. These are industry nuances, from a technical perspective that give us the authority per se to make these amendments. So in other words, these amendments are not just done arbitrarily. These are nuances from industry. All right. Let me continue with the changes that we have made. Precedence in terms of subclause. Let me see if I have it there. No. Precedence, subclause 5.6 of edition 6.1. The concern was that the JBCC principal building agreement and associated documents provide the tool, but bill number 1, preliminaries, is project specific and should therefore take precedence. Subclause 5.6 of edition 6.1 indicates the opposite. It is worded as follows. The contract documents shall be deemed to be mutually explanatory of one another. In the event of ambiguity, discrepancy, divergence, or inconsistency in or between them, this agreement shall prevail over all other contract documents. The agreed change, therefore, was that subclause 5.6 of edition 6.1 has been deleted. Then another change, employer to identify services, connections. The concern was that in terms of subclause 12.1.5 in edition 6.1, the employer shall identify access to water, sewer, stormwater, and or electricity connections to the site, which is included in the contract data. The employer is, in terms of subclause 12.1.5 in edition 6.1, involved in aspects of the execution of the works, which is temporary services, which has always been the responsibility of the contractor. The contractor should obtain from the local authority the temporary services which could be available, as the contractor is aware, of his temporary services requirements. Major claims against the employer are possible should the party representing the employer not realize the hidden implications of this clause. So the agreed change was that subclause 12.1.5 of edition 6.1 has been deleted. Then there are statutory and other notices. I don't think I've prepared a slide on that. However, the concern was that subclause 12.1.6 of edition 6.1, which reads as follows: the employer shall list statutory and other notices the contractor must submit and or comply with before possession of the site can be given. It is the responsibility of all parties to comply with the statutory and other notices which they are individually responsible for. Should this clause not be fully complied with, it could lead to major claims against the employer. The agreed change was that subclause 12.1.6 of edition 6.1 has been deleted. All right. In terms of termination and dispute resolution, which are now clauses 29 and 30, the dispute resolution clause refers specifically to new subclauses, which is clause 30.9 to 30.12, is now to an extent reworded with a fair number of changes and restructuring in the wording of the termination clause. The JBCC, in terms of international use, where we want to go from here, where we want to, what the future holds for the JBCC, what our footprint holds. So the names of the constituent members of the JBCC have been removed from the cover page. That there was a question that I was asked in terms of the Q&A service that the JBCC provides. Why was the names of the constituent members removed? I think it was from the South African Association of Architects. Why did we remove the names? One of the reasons is because we want the JBCC documents to be more internationally recognized. Now, if we have our South African flavor to it, it's not going to appeal out there in the market. And currently, we've also been asked, by the Namibian Institute of Architects for them to be able to be direct stockists of the JBCC documentation. That was a very nice proposal from them, and the board has been informed accordingly, and we are looking into that. I also received a request from a construction company in, if I'm not mistaken, in Sierra Leone for the JBC, if the JBCC documents are available in French, because that's a Francophone country. And that was also discussed in our strategy session in terms of, us as the JBCC wanting to expand our footprint into Africa. It's an excellent opportunity. But however, it's obviously a lot of work that needs to be done. And yeah, I think one of our long-term visions is to make these documents available, make our documents available into Africa and beyond. I do know, for an example, that the JBCC Principal Building Agreement was used in Nigeria by MTN, which is a good, something to write home about. But be that as it may, one of the changes that we have done is that the names of the constituent members have been removed from the cover page. Currency to be indicated in the contract data. So if you are using, obviously, the document in Botswana, you will use the term pula or the currency pula. The term cost fluctuations has been used in addition to the South African term contract price adjustments. In the adjudication and arbitration default clause, which is subclause 30.10, the previous reference to the South African organization, namely the Association of Arbitrators, is now replaced by the wording, the right to choose a locally recognized body to suggest one or more persons with appropriate skills. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your support. As you can see there, I didn't want to take this away from my chairperson, but here we have our new branding as well. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Rakesh, for that comprehensive presentation. Can I suggest for time, let's continue with our speakers. And then if you've got any questions, just note them. Then we'll have a Q&A session after the last speaker. Is everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you. The next speaker is Cliff. He's back. Cliff, I'm happy that you're back. Please take the podium.
Thank you, everybody. And please can I apologize in advance if you do see the old JBCC logo. As you will hear, there has been this new branding, but on my slides you will still see the old JBCC, and obviously still on the websites, and obviously moving forward the new branding of the logo, as we see here, is going to follow through. So just please apologize. As you see all of these right across the slides, you'll see the old, which will slowly be phased out. Just a brief history, COD's relationship with JBCC. Firstly, COD is a company specializing in providing solutions to the built environment. And our main task is to reduce risk and increase productivity. COD has achieved this through the development of eJBCC, and I'd say it's probably more than 22 years. I think our first involvement was pre the release of 2000, Series 2000 is what it was called. That was with the late Peter Bold. So that was probably around about 1998 when we first started. And it started with, we were on CD-ROM, we started with payment certificates. That was the initial start of our involvement with JBCC, was the production of automated payment certificates. And that led over the years, here we are in 2022, with a whole, as we'll see, quite a sophisticated set of websites and platforms and systems. In 2012, a suite of services known as eCloud Construction was launched. And we refer to that as the eCloud Construction Network, which is an African network of cloud-based online services, content providers, users, sponsors, and patrons. It enhances productivity on building and construction projects through collaboration, where productivity is the key to competitiveness. eCloud Construction, the network is designed to assist companies and users to improve their productivity by accessing our online services. So very briefly, some of the platforms and systems that were developed or have been developed by Contracts on Demand over the years to run our online services. Various of these platforms, what we call eDocs, these are just names that have been developed over time. We've got our document access service, our training, our eCore training platform, Marketing Maximizer, where we deal with all our patrons and sponsors and advertisers, our registered user platform, which is currently 10,000 companies and 16,000 users that are all registered within that platform. And then together with a full back-end administrative system or platform. All of this supported through our daily telephonic help desk, and we have an online support center. So if we just look at some of our, through the document access services, some of our current content providers, obviously we're going to focus around JBCC. That's really the focus of today's session. and literally 10 minutes. It'll be very short and sweet. So the JBCC documents are available online for purchase from the JBCC website at jbcc.co.za under the electronic service menu. Then we have the resellers, or what we known as the current JBCC constituents and regions. And what will happen moving forward is these documents will be available for purchase through the different reseller websites, all the constituents, each branded with their own logos. So I'm not going to go into all the different constituents. I think we all know who they all are. But each of these will have their own access points. The opportunity therefore exists for these resellers to become content providers within eCloud Construction Network, making their content available to their members and making use of the available services, systems and platforms that we have. That's just an example of the look and feel. I've just used MBSA as an example, where you'll see obviously that JBCC branding will update, and then the MBSA logo, and that would be accessible from MBSA's website. So that's the current look and feel where purchasers would access these documents. All JBCC resellers, or the constituents as we know them, together with JBCC as the content provider, all share in the revenue from the sale of these documents. The document access service, very briefly, I'm not going to go into it, is made up of a basic suite, which is very simple, no need to register for those people that want quick and easy access to accessing and purchasing the online documents. We have a Pro Suite, which is then requires registration. You work within the cloud, and all the online productivity enhancing facilities are available within that Pro Suite. The following JBCC documents are available, and this is for each of the current and earlier editions. So we have project documents, which is basically for use on projects. We provide the suite of agreements either for educational or for reference purposes. We have all the various active forms, and I'm not going to go through, we all know what we're talking about. And we provide computational, so the certificates in a computational format. So in other words, doing all of the calculations for you. Standard template letters is also available within the system. Some of the, when we talk of productivity, what are these productivity enhancing features that we were talking about? And very simply, setting up a company office account where you've got different levels of users. Company office reports, transaction histories are available, history of invoices and statements, documents you can purchase using credit balance rather than just a credit card, so that suits a corporate rather than pulling out a credit card for each and every purchase, where your credit balance reduces over time. Your projects or your documents are all stored by project. There is database storage of all the project participants, and these obviously can be then reused within the documents as and when you create these documents. Copy and import data features from previously created projects. That is a very useful and time-saving feature. And then collaboration, which is the key to really the use of these documents. So collaborate electronically with other third parties, other team members in remote offices. Electronic tendering is one of the features we have, where we have secured tender vaults. We have a comprehensive electronic signature or initialing process that is also all available. Very briefly, as we know, JBCC have what they call interactive virtual seminars, through webinars on demand, Contracts on Demand facilitates and assists JBCC in all of these events. Manage the CPD associated quizzes and certificates. And what's planned, I think we're planning one event per month scheduled for 2023. That's just an example of a CPD certificate that would come out of the system. Then through CPD on Demand, where we have our current providers, the data or the content coming from those JBCC virtual webinars are then sitting within each of these three platforms, within each of these three services, for users then to purchase the accredited content for CPD purposes. So that is all the recordings. And then lastly, just from an advertising and promotion point of view, some of the patrons or some of the sponsors, advertisers that are advertising in the documents are listed, and that is also all available. Interactive A4 promotional page, that's just an example. This is all to help generate additional revenue for JBCC, so that's an example of some of the promotional pages within documents, and then what we call interactive banners on the various different web pages as you move through the system. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff, for that presentation. Very technical, I must say. But I'm sure with your help desk, people can be assisted from time to time. Our next speaker is going to be Advocate Pierre Rousseau, the chairperson of Association of Arbitrators. Pierre?
Mr. Khole, thank you very much for this opportunity. The topic that I've been asked to address is dispute resolution. Now, in the 15 minutes allocated is a very short period of time to fully discuss dispute resolution, but I will try to give a bird's eye view. Dispute resolution has developed considerably in modern times. In addition to court litigation and arbitration, adjudication has been introduced as an accelerated form of dispute resolution. Mediation has also become popular, and further procedures have developed, namely a combination of arbitration and mediation in a single structured process. Now, litigation in the courts is well known. It is the process of formal resolution of disputes. And litigation is the ultimate and sovereign dispute resolution process and stands above all other processes. I say this because the courts are statutory or constitutional bodies. They have the powers to review and enforce the results of other dispute resolution processes that we will look at in a moment. So in addition to court litigation, the following processes exist. First, arbitration. It's well defined and well understood, and it has its own place amongst dispute resolution processes. Secondly, adjudication. It's become an important and popular dispute resolution mechanism. In South Africa, it's not governed by legislation, but it has been adopted in agreements. 3 is mediation. Mediators do not make binding awards, and they do not exercise a judicial function, but it is a speedy and an economical mechanism. And then in the 4th place, ARB-MED or MED-ARB. This mechanism is an example of the complementary rather than alternative nature or relationship that can exist amongst dispute resolution mechanisms. Now, we will look at all these in a moment in a little bit more detail. Arbitration, adjudication, and mediation have become known as alternative dispute mechanisms. However, they are not truly alternatives to litigation, because litigation, as I've said, litigation in the courts stands above all and is sovereign. Perhaps a more appropriate name for arbitration, adjudication, and mediation would have been additional dispute resolution mechanisms, because they are not truly alternative to litigation, but the term or phrase alternative dispute resolution has become so entrenched that it is understood for what it is. And I don't think anyone will refer to additional dispute resolution mechanisms. We stick to alternative dispute resolution. So let us firstly briefly look at mediation. A mediator must be acceptable to the parties and must be trusted. The approach is fundamentally different from the approach in arbitrations or adjudications, which is an adversarial approach. Mediation is not, it is not only permissible, but it is essential in mediations that the mediator must discuss the dispute freely and privately with each party separately. The mediator must be something of a super person, because he or she must be neutral, impartial, objective, flexible, persuasive, honest, must have a sense of humor, must be patient, observant, and persevering. Now, where do you find such a person? But apparently they do exist. I'm not one of them. The mediator tries to compensate for the parties' deficiencies. When parties are hostile or emotional, the mediator must deal with these feelings. When parties make progress, the mediator must build on it. When parties are stuck on position, the mediator must shift them to interests. So, mediators can foster the settlement of disputes on an amicable basis. And parties are more likely to comply with agreements that they've reached in mediation because they feel that they've been listened to and that they were understood. And they understand why they've compromised. Next, I want to look at adjudication. In the United Kingdom, from 1996, adjudication became legislated as a mandatory dispute resolution process with limited exceptions. It's mandatory on all construction prime contracts and subcontracts. It has subsequently also become enacted through legislation in Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and Malaysia. In South Africa, there is no legislation to this effect. Unless specifically provided for in terms of the building contract, adjudication is not a mandatory mechanism. In South Africa, the JBCC was a leader in the field of adjudication because the principal building agreement of the JBCC, which was published in 2004, incorporated an entrenched adjudication in the local construction industry for the first time. It has since been followed in other major standard form construction contracts in South Africa, and I must say it has become a very popular form of dispute resolution. Adjudication is often described as a pay now, argue later process. It is intended to resolve disputes quickly and to allow the parties to get on with their work. Its purpose is to deliver certainty on a particular dispute and is of a temporary binding nature. So, incorporated as a mechanism into a construction contract, adjudication is intended to be, and sometimes is, a condition precedent before parties can proceed to arbitration or litigation. Practically, the obligation to adjudicate arises by virtue of the terms of the contract between the parties. And in every case, the terms of the adjudication are contract-specific, and it entails any dispute arising from the connection, from or in connection with the contract. I say that it is contract-specific because if you study the adjudication terms and rules of the JBCC and you compare them, for instance, with the GCC or with FIDIC or with NEC3, you will see that there are major differences in terms of specifics, but the nature of the procedure or the proceedings is the same. It's intended to be of a temporary binding effect. So the role of an adjudicator is not that of an arbitrator. The adjudicator decides the dispute as an expert, and he or she is not bound by the legal rules of evidence or procedure, save that the adjudicator must observe the rules of natural justice. That simply means that the adjudicator must listen to both sides, and the adjudicator may not be a judge in his or her own cause, so the adjudicator must not have any interest in the dispute. The advantages of adjudication are, amongst other things, expedition, confidentiality. It's a relatively simple procedure. Hearings are normally not required. An expert is deciding the matter, and the determination is immediately enforceable. Now, the courts in South Africa have consistently held that the determinations of adjudicators are immediately enforceable and binding until set aside at a later stage in an arbitration or in court litigation. The most recent Supreme Court of Appeal judgment of Framatome versus Eskom, Justice Matopo said this about adjudications, and I think I can't put it better. It is plain that the purpose of adjudication was to introduce a speedy mechanism of settling disputes in construction contracts on a provisional interim basis and requiring the decisions of adjudicators to be enforced, pending the final determination of disputes by arbitration. As far as the procedure is concerned, adjudicators are given a fairly free hand. They are required to act impartially and permitted to take the initiative in ascertaining the facts and the law. So that is adjudication. Now I want to move on to arbitration. This is a very old mechanism for the settling of disputes. It is perhaps the most ancient mechanism in the world. A dispute is referred to arbitration in terms of an agreement, and the Arbitration Act of 1965 applies to arbitrations arising out of written agreements. It is often assumed that court arbitration is faster and cheaper than litigation. And this may be true for small arbitrations, but it's not necessarily the case in respect of all arbitrations. The advantages of arbitration are the following. 1, privacy and confidentiality. 2, finality, because unless the parties have agreed on a right to appeal, the award is final. 3, flexibility. Arbitrators have considerable control over the way a matter proceeds. 4, the ability of the parties to choose the arbitrator and thus to obtain an expert in the field. You don't get, as might happen in court litigation, allocated a person that you don't know, or a random judge almost for your case. Parties can agree on an arbitrator, or a specialist body can appoint the arbitrator if the parties cannot agree. Representation of parties is not restricted to legal practitioners, as is the case in court litigation. Therefore, parties are free to choose suitably qualified representatives, and I think especially in construction matters, quite often claims consultants may be preferable from the party's perspective than using legal practitioners. Another very important advantage is that the tribunal is consistent. The same arbitrator will conduct the entire process from the initial pre-arbitration meeting through all interlocutory steps, and will also hear the final substantive case. Convenience is another advantage. The parties, under the direction of the arbitrator, can choose the place, date, and times for the hearing. They're not bound to have their case heard in the court building in Pritchard Street in central Johannesburg during court hours on a court day. They can agree to have the hearing in Sandton or in Polokwane or wherever is convenient for them on any date, and during any times. Finally, arbitrations save time. In the case of court litigation, there are often long waiting periods and parties can abuse pretrial procedures to cause delays. That often happens with obstructive litigants, deliberately cause delays in high court litigation, and then the proceedings can become extremely protracted. Arbitrators who are skillful and experienced can avoid such delays to ensure a short process. Now, the disadvantages of arbitrations are, arbitrators do not have all the powers of judges. For instance, they cannot join third parties who refuse to be joined, notwithstanding that they have an interest in the case. Secondly, the parties must pay the arbitrator for the hearing facilities. And thirdly, arbitrations are not necessarily cost-effective. However, on the whole, I think when you weigh the advantages and the disadvantages, I'm of the view that arbitration is to be preferred to litigation, especially in construction disputes. Then finally, I want to look briefly at a combination of arbitration and mediation. This is the MED-ARB or ARB-MED to which I've referred at the beginning of my talk. This is a combination of arbitration and mediation. It's a single structured process, and it is slowly becoming popular. Now, it's important to distinguish between ARB-MED and MED-ARB. In the case of ARB-MED, there's first an arbitration and then a mediation. In the case of MED-ARB, it's the other way around. A simple example of ARB-MED is a composite single agreement to arbitrate one issue in a dispute such as liability and to mediate another such as damages, with a fallback position for referral of the second issue to a new arbitrator if the mediation on the second issue is not successful. So what would happen in a damages claim, for instance, is that the parties would agree, well, they cannot agree on who is liable. So there has to be an arbitration to determine liability. That's done by the arbitrator. Now, once liability is fixed, then that same arbitrator can proceed to mediate the issue of damages, because then it's simply a question of negotiating and arriving at an agreement on what the quantum of damages is. So this is a classic example of the complementary rather than alternative relationship of mechanisms within the total dispute resolution spectrum. Now, while the same person can fulfill the sequential roles of arbitrator, followed by mediator in ARB-MED, the same person ought not to be chosen to fill both roles when the parties wish to follow the opposite sequence of MED-ARB. Sometimes parties feel that they must mediate first and see if they can't arrive at a settlement before they proceed to arbitration. That's typically when you will have MED-ARB. But in those cases, the person who has mediated should not subsequently fulfill the role of arbitrator, notwithstanding that he or she may be available. Such a prospect inevitably distorts or inhibits the mediation process, quite apart from its risky overtones insofar as the erstwhile mediator is concerned when the arbitration stage is reached. Because remember, while he or she mediated, that mediator would have been in confidence told many things about the parties' respective cases, which the arbitrator should never know. It should only emerge during the course of evidence, those facts which the parties elect to place before the arbitrator. So, in the case of MED-ARB, there has to be two different persons involved with each stage. well, in the 2 consecutive stages. So in conclusion, my view is, specifically in the context of construction contracts, that adjudication is the most useful, efficient, time-saving and cost-effective process. And that is followed by arbitration, notwithstanding that it may not in present times be as cost-effective as it used to be. It does, however, save substantial amount of time compared to litigation. And then mediation is a very economical, quick process, and it is gaining popularity, but in my experience, the climate in South Africa is still very litigious, and it will take some time before mediation and ARB-Med or Med-ARB will gain the same level of popularity as adjudications and arbitrations. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. Now, I'm so pleased to hear from you about the characteristic of a good mediator. That one of them is to be friendly, open, and smile. That's very interesting. I actually appeared before Pierre on an arbitration, and one of the witnesses was so petrified. She left the stage without even requesting the arbitrator for permission or whatever. No, thank you very much. We're really running out of time. Rick, I think you're on the floor. If you can just come and address the meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Tamburan, Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Khole, Mr. Singh, CEO, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I have been asked to talk about construction dispute solutions. There's a bit of a conundrum in that topic heading, because the moment you introduce dispute into the solution, there's a tension, because a dispute would ordinarily, and this is not necessarily defined in any of the contractual suites. I think that FIDIC is probably the second edition 2007 FIDIC is the only contractual document that defines a dispute. So we're primarily going to look at the case law to determine what a dispute is. Essentially, FIDIC, and I know, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, this is a JBCC conference, and let me take this opportunity as well to congratulate you on your 25th legitimate year of existence, although we are aware of the much longer process that you have been involved in this environment. When something is developed into a dispute, it becomes, usually it becomes intractable. And for that reason, because there are time lines, you're on a treadmill, and you have to ascend this treadmill with your notices, and you just carry on running, and you are eventually, you come out of this dispute resolution process. So my topic cannot be that. So the way I conceived of this topic is that it's not a dispute that we're dealing with, but a disagreement that could become a dispute. And how do we avoid them? That's the key thing. So I was starting off by saying FIDIC, in very basic terms, says that a dispute emerges when a claim is made. And it could be a claim for a sum of money, extension of time, even an engineer's determination. And then there would be a notice of dissatisfaction. The other party would reject it, and lo and behold, there's a dispute. And now you're on the treadmill, and you're giving your notices, and the opportunity to solve that dispute, other than through one of the well-known ADR mechanisms, is virtually over. You can settle. Parties can always, at some stage, come to their senses and say, but it's better to settle this. So my address is going to be very briefly about the best ways to avoid disputes from occurring. But let me immediately say, I don't think there's anybody in this room that would believe in this pipe dream that you can ever avoid disputes. They will arise. One of the reasons they will arise is because of questionable tendering strategies. Contractors come in at a low price, and they've got an expert team of claims experts thinking of every conceivable claim, money spinner out there, and they are churned out, and you're in the dispute realm already. In his foreword to Professor Maritz's latest revised, updated book on the JBCC contract, Alan Boddle says that I believe that very few players across the spectrum of the built environment, from professional consultants through to principal contractors and their subcontractors, have been fortunate to entirely avoid disagreements and disputes on building projects. So accepting that, let's see how we can possibly then avoid dispute. Something that is not suitable for small contracts, and I emphasize that, this is for large projects, engineering type projects like the Medupis and the Gautrain would be dispute resolution boards. And the thinking there, the thinking there is simply that because the members of the dispute resolution boards would visit the sites, they would be aware of when there is a potential dispute that is in the making. They would be apprised of contract documents, minutes, etc., etc. So what the perception is that contractors and members of the professional team and employers are usually cautious before they just put in frivolous claims. And then there's also a tendency among the employers not to contest valid claims for too long a period. That is certainly a method of avoiding disputes. It is apparently very successful in America. The last time I looked at some statistics on it, the statistics were absolutely mind-blowing. But as my dear friend and colleague Pierre Rousseau pointed out, the environment in South Africa is far too litigious for that type of thing. And in a project that I was involved in, when I spoke to one of the engineers recently to try and get statistics on this type of board and its functioning, I was told that the statistics here were very disappointing. So that would be the one method, but only for absolutely large contracts. The second problem that arises that creates disputes, and that steps that can be taken to avoid those disputes, would be the standardized suite of contracts. In this case, the JBCC. Why do we say that? The JBCC is drawn up by a committee of suitably qualified lawyers and engineers. This document is well thought through. It's got a particular structure, and it doesn't tolerate for things to be introduced into this contract that doesn't gel with the contract. So one must bear in mind when you are dealing with a standardized contract, it's a well thought through contract, and they are reviewed from time to time. Sometimes it takes long to bring in new and very necessary provisions to improve the functioning of the contract, because as one goes along, you discover what problems may arise or may not arise, interpretational problems, and you want to then clarify provisions. So the temptation to tinker with any standardized contract, including the JBCC, must be resisted at all costs. One very frequently finds in-house lawyers that are not adequately experienced and qualified in this particular field, and they want to introduce standard conditions or particular conditions, and that is something that ought to be avoided. If you want to do something like that, and if it is vitally necessary, and I say necessary, if this issue that arises maybe because of an interpretation issue, rather go and speak to one of the attorneys that specializes in this field, that understands the visceral anatomy of such a contract, and that will use the right language to introduce an appropriate clause. So why this strict adherence to a standardized contract? There are many benefits that are derived from it, because firstly, the more one deals with these standardized contracts, you develop a thorough understanding of how it is intended to operate. And because of that understanding that is developed, one finds that it promotes and it will hopefully achieve one of the following four requirements that I believe would assist contractors and employers in avoiding something from becoming an intractable dispute. The first thing, it is likely to result in the efficient execution of the works. If you've got a proper understanding of it, you know how the works are to be executed. It will result in effective administration of the contract. And if a contract is administered properly, and we'll get to administration because I know that the chair emphasized this particular issue as well earlier on in his address, it is likely to ensure a speedy resolution of potential performance issues, or maybe one should say non-performance issues, prior to them reaching a stage where they become intractable. And it encourages well-meaning parties that operate in goodwill. And I emphasize in goodwill, because if you don't have goodwill, you can turn anything on its head, and that can turn into an intractable dispute. Whether all of these goals can be achieved will always depend on the levels of experience of the critical role players that are involved in the ensuing process and that are there to ensure the success of a project. And it's important that they are well qualified, because when situations develop, sometimes at an unpredictable time, this could easily result in a project going pear-shaped. And if you have the right people there that know how to deal with disruptions and delays and all those other issues that result in late payments, etc., you resolve or you avoid disputes from occurring. So a good team of people. This latter aspect comes into the third very important issue to avoid solutions. And Mr. Tamburan, you struck the nail on the head right in the beginning when you said, when the people don't do what they're supposed to do. So poor contract management, including, and I say including because there are a whole host of gremlins, and the 15 minutes allowed for me to address you will never permit me to deal with the types of gremlins that can occur. But some of them, and just one brief label for them, poor, inadequate, and inaccurate record keeping. So how do we now address the problem of poor management, administration of a contract? Where the previous solution was standardized contracts. When users of those contracts become acquainted to them and they acquire ongoing experience in their application and execution, it makes it easier to administer the contract as well, because they become more confident when they are in the execution process. And for purposes of this particular topic, I must just emphasize that it is critically important for all parties involved in the execution and administration of a contract to have a thorough understanding of all the contract's provisions. You must be able, when a situation arrives, to say, this is the clause that deals with that situation. You've got to go to that clause and you apply it strictly. Whether you are the employer or the contractor, as soon as that type of skill comes to the fore, where they see my counterparty and my counterparty's representatives know how they are going to deal with this contract, and they bring you up shortly with a notice or whatever, immediately caution enters the arena, and they are light, and that's also how you avoid disputes, because they know you mustn't be trifled with. But too frequently, and let me say, when I say too frequently inexperienced persons, this is aimed at people that have, it's got nothing to do with the other problems that we're dealing with in South Africa. We've got other problems, and those are problems that we have to deal with. But young people that have not been exposed for an adequate period of time are put in positions that they are unable to manage, and they need proper support staff. So it's not only the professional team, and let me add, an adequately staffed professional team, but also an adequately staffed support team. Because one man cannot carry the can on a big project. It's impossible. It's hard work. And you need devotion and dedication, and you don't have time to get tired if you're building, because the project has to succeed and you've got to make it succeed. So the proper contract management by experienced contract management teams and support staffs sometimes avoid disputes or problems that arise from being kicked down the road. They must grapple with the problem, they must tackle it before it becomes this monolith where you have to get highfalutin lawyers in that are absolutely necessary at that stage and also convenient to resolve a problem that could easily have been resolved at the outset by staff that are not competent and adequately experienced. So what does proper contract management require of the team, professional and support team? It requires strict adherence to timelines. It requires meticulous and ongoing record keeping that is comprehensive, accurate, and adequate. It requires the timeless and proper assessment of claims. To assess a claim from a contractor, you must properly understand it. And if you don't understand it, they have QSs, you have QSs, go and speak to the QSs, drill down into the claim so that you understand it and deal with it finely and properly. Too often engineers want to avoid taking a decision and they want to push, or the principal agent, and they want to push the claim down the road. It never goes away. It will always come back to bite you. Deal with it immediately and don't deal with it in drips and drabs. The moment you deal with it in drips and drabs, frustration creeps in and the problem becomes an unmanageable one, and the disagreement will be a dispute. The next issue is obtain and preserve all your records. This includes accounting records, invoices, source documents, books of account, progress reports, minutes of meetings, pricing documents, or costing documents. And with costing documents, all costing documents are usually coded. And you cannot get a proper understanding of costing documents if you don't get the raw data. So get the raw data, make sure that it is given to you so that you can understand the claim and assess it properly. And when you preserve the documentation, make sure that it's filed under appropriate labels, because as sure as we are all in attendance here, that war that you are preparing for, that may never come, could come, and then you need the documents quickly and they must be at your fingertips. And if they're not at your fingertips, you're going to lose the war. That's important. And if the other side sees that you are equipped with a wherewithal from your armory of documentation, they will also be cautious in taking you on in an arbitration or whatever the case may be, so that we don't get to peers' side of the problem. The other thing is, never assume when you are in a negotiation with your counterparty and the counterparty's representatives that you are on the same page. You may think you're on the same page, and maybe you are on the same page. But record what is said, what is done, who has to do what, when it has to be done, in what quantity, how, etc. Record everything. A killer of memory is time. And projects last a long time. And by the end of the project, when the litigation is on the go, the memories have faded because so much has happened on that project that it would be impossible to require of the people that were involved to solely rely on their memory. Keep contemporaneous records. So if you've gone into a meeting, you believe you've got everything on record, who has to do what, when, how much, and the quality and quantity, go back and immediately write a letter. Make sure that it's contemporaneous. Record the meeting and record what was said, what was agreed, and how that problem is going to be resolved so that there is no later dispute about it. And the fourth and last item is the delay in obtaining statutory records of decisions from departments, environmental affairs, or whichever other department. Those applications must be made at the earliest possible date and use experienced environmentalists to assist you in getting the approvals so that there's no delay. Once the tender documents have gone out, been accepted, the contracts are signed, that you can run with your rolling out of your program. So those are my solutions for avoiding disputes from arising. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Eric, for that wonderful presentation. I take that you were with, one of our senior arbitrators. He normally tells us that, JBCC does not have as many cases or problems when coming to interpretation. You've got very few of those because, and I think you've just confirmed that it's a well thought document, a standard suite of document and so forth. I think it's a good observation. Colleagues, I think we might be running against time. Can I then maybe ask if there are any questions? I believe all the program director, can I just check with my program? All the presentations will be made available to the attendees, eh? Is that correct? Okay, so we'll definitely get those to. So you can just bear with us and tell me your name and the question.
Good morning. My name is Sean Pino from Industan Malambeti, attorneys here in Sandton. A lot has been said about dispute and how to avoid dispute. The one thing that I've noticed over 15 years of practicing in construction law and doing a lot of disputes on a day-to-day basis is that the contract administration, as you've mentioned, it becomes a problem. And especially what I've noticed is the principal agents feeling that they are the agent of the employer and not an independent agent that's there to manage the contract fairly, to avoid disputes as they come out at inception, like quite a number of people have spoken about. One of the things that the NEC3 does is they provide a step-by-step, very basic guide to say, if this is the problem, this is how you adjudicate it. If that's the problem, we talk about it immediately, we come to a resolution, we record it. The JBCC doesn't do that. It provides a lot more scope for discretion of a principal agent, and therefore, if that principal agent then thinks that he's an agent of the employer, it results in him making decisions with that discretion that negatively impact the project. So my question is, why doesn't the JBCC follow a more NEC approach in respect of guiding the principal agent how to do the job, or B, why does not JBCC not have a panel of PAs that are preferred PAs that are properly educated on how to independently and impartially manage the contract on a day-to-day basis?
Thank you, Sean. Any other question? Oh, is that Craig? How's that? Welcome. You're on the floor, Craig.
Hello, I'm Tony from Ingelson Consult. My question basically comes from the problem, which I term a hot potato within where the JBCC operates, and because you find that it operates in extremities, where it operates in poor communities, and also operates in high-end residential areas and stuff, where principal agents and employers alike avoid the issue around business forums. And I think this issue is not going to go away, considering environment in South Africa. Is JBCC probably looking at some kind of a collaborative or partnering option, which the NEC also provides, by the way, because we need to address this issue quite quickly through a contract, I believe, because no one wants to address it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tony. I think I saw Craig.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Craig Bain. I'm representing Master Builders South Africa, and I'm also on the JBCC drafting panel that Rakesh referred to earlier today. So just in response to the previous question, as well as the issue raised by Advocate Dunn about changes that are continually made to standard documentation and why the need arises for these changes, I think we must just bear in mind that principal agents, quantity surveyors, project managers are all appointed and paid by the employers, and they also see their primary role as protecting employers' best interests. So one's got to be aware of he who pays the piper calls the tune. So unfortunately, that is the nature, that it's not an impartial situation where these people are not paid by either the employer or the contractor. They are effectively agents of the employer, and that does have an influence on that situation. My question, however, and maybe this is directed more to the first, to Advocate Rousseau's speech about the dispute or alternative dispute resolution, as he referred to it. And I think what we unfortunately lose when we go the arbitration and adjudication and even mediation routes is because those processes are all confidential, we actually learn nothing from the processes, and we are not able to adapt and enhance our contracts based on the outcomes and experiences learnt from these dispute resolution processes. Unlike High Court judgments, which one can read, you can see exactly what the judge says, what the issue was, and where necessary one can adapt and amend these contracts in that situation. So so my question primarily is, how do we overcome the issue of the confidentiality of arbitrations and adjudication determinations and rulings, that we can actually then apply and use these in adapting our contracts? Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Can I take the last question, then we'll open up. Okay.
Morning. My name is Rufuno from Dobada Attorneys Incorporated. I think the first person that asked the question asked what I wanted to ask, but my question is more of a twofold, directed to Advocate Dunn, Senior Counsel Advocate Dunn. You kept on mentioning to say, especially with regards to us young practitioners, we need to be very careful with this kind of contracts. And it just took me back to 3 to 4 years ago when I attempted doing my first JBCC without attending any course with regards to construction or engineering law or arbitration, because I thought it would just be like any other contract because I had done company law and contracts until I found out that these are unique contracts which have their own language. And hence, I needed to go back to school to study construction and engineering law to really understand the concepts, because I didn't know that maybe an employer in JBCC will be defined differently from the FIDIC contracts. So to someone like myself who is still young in this industry, what advice would you give? Because I find that it is hard to get seniors who are, for lack of a better word and without insulting anyone, to get assistance, especially with regards to myself, because I am a sole proprietor. So I find myself working in fee-sharing basis with other attorneys, which has been helping a lot for me to understand the contracts more, and from people like the QS, from my clients that I do have. But what advice would you give to someone like me in a way to accelerate myself to be well acquainted with such contracts?
All right, thank you. I think I'm going to start with Pierre and come this way. Okay, no, sorry, Pierre, you can just use the mic there. You don't have to come in, can you use the mic there? I think there were quite a few questions that the issue of confidentiality.
Thank you, Mr.
Outcome.
Thank you, Mr. Khole. The issue of confidentiality and privacy, and those two rules that apply to arbitrations and adjudications, is something that comes up from time to time because people, as you pointed out, Craig, we don't learn anything because the determinations or the awards are always confidential and they never become public. But I think the confidentiality of the two kinds of proceedings, arbitrations and adjudications, is such a very important consideration for parties that once that is waived or done away with, that both kinds of procedures will lose a lot of their attraction, perhaps most of it, because parties to commercial arbitrations and commercial disputes and construction disputes do not want the details of their dispute to get out there. But it is a problem. We must learn from what we can from arbitrations and adjudications. And the only solution I can think of, and I would like to invite my friend Eric to add his wisdom, my solution that I propose is that the drafting committees of standard form contracts should perhaps draw more or consult more with experienced arbitrators and adjudicators. They are out there, they are well known, and they can make suggestions as to what they have learned through the years in the course of dispute resolution. But I think the confidentiality should never be done away with. Eric?
Is it on? It's on. Pierre, I agree with you, and it is only through a consultation process that the information that is gleaned from any arbitral process or adjudicative process can be made known, in the sense that you won't be able to disclose who the parties are. That's the first thing that you can't disclose. But you can discuss the principle. You can say, in this particular setting, that was the legal principle that was involved, and that was the outcome against that setting. And one can, in 5 lines or 6 lines, say, what the issue was and what the resolution was. You cannot take the arbitral award or the adjudication decision and give it to anyone else, because then you are already breaching the confidentiality requirement. So I agree with you. I think that's the only possible way of doing it.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Colleagues, because of time, can I then suggest that we will, if there are any other questions that have not been answered, the speakers will still be here with us, and during lunch or whatever we can network, and then I'm sure some of those questions can be discussed. Thank you very much to the speakers, and thank you, Program Director. Thank you.
May I ask the speakers not to leave the stage so that we can take a nice photo? We need to prove to the board how we spend the money. Just now we've got fake photos that we are putting on our documentation. Okay, where is the photographer? May we please have a photo? Chairman, please join us on the stage. We need these photos. Thank you very much.
More fees.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what I'm going to ask us to do now. Can we all stand? Can we all just stand on our feet, please? If we can. Thank you. If you've got somebody, just find somebody and just stretch your hand to this person and the next person around next to you. Please, 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 just find somebody. Get very close to them to a point where you can be able to access and touch their shoulders. Trust you me, it's not sexual harassment. We're getting somewhere with this. No, not the hand, the shoulder, Nana. As in like, thank you. Thank you very much. Are we stretched enough? Okay, let us just do this and just massage the person's shoulder. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Just that massage, a free 5-minute massage. Halala, thank you. Unfortunately, we cannot do the other massage, but that will do. Okay, let's just take our hands and keep our hands above our heads. And just do that. And let's just clap for the speakers that were just on board right now. Thank you very much. This is just to keep you awake. In my other life, I am a qualified education, training, and development specialist. So I know that the concentration span of an adult is supposed to be 20 minutes. I've had to remind myself that, we've been sitting here since 9:30. Oh, it's too much. But ladies and gentlemen, we've got tea and coffee that is available outside. Please don't be shy. Go out there. We've already paid for these things. Go and enjoy. We'll not be able to have a tea break. So as and when you've got a demand and a need to go outside and grab some refreshments, please do feel free to do so. And also I've been made aware that we've got people that have joined us. They are online and we forgot to acknowledge them. Thank you very much to all of those of you who are joining our conference online, and we do appreciate and recognize you. We have got a Twitter handle that we're asking you to please follow us on Twitter, and our Twitter handle is there with a capital T, HE, Joint Building Contracts Committee, the Joint Building Contracts Committee, _ JBCC, the Joint Building Contracts Committee _ JBCC. Another handle is @there with a capital T _ JBCC, _JBCC. And on Facebook, we are simply JBCC. Please do show us some love, follow us, and make those of people that did not come and join us here become envious and see what is it that they are missing. I will not go to the summary of the panel discussion. I will do it as part of my final remarks towards the end of the program so that we can be able to save time. I am worried because I don't want to play into the time of lunch, which is supposed to be at 1 o'clock. So I am going to go straight to the next session and request that our moderator, the young one, I almost said me, now I remember that I said the young one, it's going to be Ausi Giriboni Tsilwane, who is the BBCBE Youth Secretary General, and she's also the Chief Executive of Ramtsilo. Ramtsilo is one of the innovative companies within the space of manufacturing. They actually manufacture bricks using recycled plastic. So it will be very interesting for us to have a discussion with this young lioness who is going to be moderating this session for us. And this session is called the Current Challenges and the Coherent Recovery Plan for South Africa's Infrastructure's Future. Okay. Please come over, ma'am. Can we give a round of applause? Simkhuthaze. Thank you very much. And then next that will be joining us is Dr. Sitsabo Dlamini. Dr. Sitsabo Dlamini is the founder of Sitsabo Project Managers. He started the business in May 2004 after working for Portal Partnership Architects in Parktown North as professional senior architectural technologist, and the RSSC Group as a construction manager for 5 years. Dr. Dlamini pioneered his work in South Africa during his study period in Pretoria in the early 90s and after graduation, as he worked for Mike Payne Architects in Witbank and later RFB Architects in Auckland Park. The vast experience that Dr. Dlamini amassed while working for these companies served to strengthen his ambition to start his own business. Between 2001 and 2005, Dr. Dlamini went on to consolidate his project management expertise with the University of Bath in UK, where he did his MSc in International Construction Management. Dr. Dlamini exercises unique influence in traditional architectural space, construction engineering, and project management thinking. He employs contemporary innovative approaches and his work in practice bears testimony to his thinking in shaping theory and practice in infrastructure delivery. More recently, between 2010 and 2014, Dr. Dlamini studied PhD in construction management and engineering with the University of Reading in the UK. His commitment to continuous learning means that his capabilities are progressively enhanced, remain relevant to 21st century demands for economic value. This places him as a disciplined beacon of hope for the global infrastructure fraternity. As an accomplished academic and industry expert of vision, Dr. Dlamini has established himself a reputable professional of creativity, conviction, and tireless devotion to the infrastructure sector best practice development models. His academic and industry experience in South Africa and the UK make him a unique asset for the state as he continues to contribute immensely towards the infrastructure sector best practice initiatives. Dr. Dlamini spends his time providing leadership to management teams at various levels of the business. He has developed unique skills in the industry and invests a lot of effort into building relationships with potential clients. He empowers his project delivery teams through various capacity development programs. He utilizes the expertise of line managers as well as offer his own skills and knowledge to the achievement of a common goal. Dr. Dlamini is a strong proponent of sound cooperative values. He has on several occasions opted to pull out of some public sector's infrastructure projects due to corruption. While this has cost the business millions of rands in lost revenue, he is proud that he refused to be reckless. His strong ethos of integrity and leadership suggests that Sitsabo project managers will continue to grow even to greater heights. I'm not sure whether is it the CV that I'm reading that is this transforming the stage, or is it a safety hazard and I must just run for Ladies Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Dr. Sitsabo Dlamini. Please do join us on stage. Where's the good doctor? Is he not here? Or maybe it's just gone out. Okay. We'll see Dr. Sitsabo when he comes on board. And then our next panelist is another young lion, Refilo Lidikha. Refilo Lidikha studied civil engineering at the University of Johannesburg. He has previously served as the chairperson of the South African Institute of Civil Engineering, SAICI, in Johannesburg, and has also served in the National Executive Council of the National Society of Black Engineers. He is currently the national chairperson of the Black Business Council in the Build Environment Youth, and also serves on the National Home Builders Registration Council, the NHBRC. His experiences also include working as an engineer for Group 5 and various engineering consulting companies. He is currently a full-time entrepreneur and founder of the VTV Group and 3D Printcrete and Robotics, which is the company that is currently providing us with our link for those of us that are joining us online. He has written numerous academic conference papers at international conferences and is completing his PhD in engineering focuses on artificial intelligence and robotic system. Let's put our hands together for Refilwe Lidikha. Last but not least, we have got Stephen Harry Kaplan, who has been corporate member of the SAICI since 1984, a registered professional civil engineer with EXA since 1984, a member of ICE in the UK and chartered engineer since 1989. Finally, he has been a registered professional construction project manager with the SACPMP since 2011. Stephen joined the SAICI team as the COO in April 2013, bringing with him more than 35 years of consulting engineering experience. Stephen took over as the acting CEO from September 2018 to March 2020. Stephen was appointed onto the SAICI Council for the 2022 and 2023 years. In April 2022, he was appointed the President-elect 2022. Stephen is honored with the 2018 SAICI President's Award and elected to the grade of Fellow in 2019. Stephen is a graduate of the University of Cape Town, holding a BSc Honours in Civil Engineering. Stephen's career spans over 40 years, studying out with the detailed civil and structural design of buildings and bridges, during which time he built up extensive experience working on numerous multidiscipline and infrastructure projects, with particular focus on the construction and project management sector, one of his highlights being his role as a project manager on the prestigious Gautrain Rapid Rail Link, the Hatfield Station, in 2006 and 2007. Stephen, please do join us on stage. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll have to check where is the good doctor. I'm expecting that he should be here and be good to us. I am not sure if he's online. Can somebody please check on us if he's joining us virtually? I did not get the memo. Can somebody check for us, please, guys at the back? Is he online? Not yet. Okay, please do indicate when he gets to be online with us. In the meantime, I'll also go and check out with our people that are assisting us. All right, over to you, sisters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I was actually hoping that the doctor would be here because I wanted to tell him that if you're going to be working with the youth, he needs to cut his bio by 5 or 6 pages because, yeah, I even got hot just listening to that. It was a lot of information being provided. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and your support of the JBCC. If I were to ask everyone in the room, what are some of the challenges that they've encountered with infrastructure development in the South African context, I believe we would share at least one challenge each in this room. But in the spirit of growth and celebration of the JBCC, we will have a more progressive and growth-focused conversation. Infrastructure has played a critical role in supporting economic development and laying a longer-term foundation for resilience and inclusive development. Dating back centuries globally, The built environment has been one of the most critical contributors towards mass job creation, boosting economic activity, supporting other industries, as well as attracting investment. We therefore cannot deny the importance of infrastructure development in the economy. I'm very happy to be joined by a panel of experts and very passionate individuals within the built environment. Billions of rands have been allocated to ensure that there is growth within the environment post-COVID, but also with the looming recession that we're looking at. So today's conversation is not only important, but it will drive how we do business going forward within the built environment, working into infrastructure development. But what is important is to, one, ensure that this is done in an inclusive manner, that opportunities are fully realized within the infrastructure rollout or development in economic recovery. And thirdly, that projects are properly rolled out and managed. We heard a lot about ensuring that duly competent individuals are assigned in positions, so we don't have problems rather within the rolling out of infrastructure development. Parliament has identified 4 priority areas, being infrastructure development, industrialization and local production or development, economic stimulus, and lastly, energy security. Our focus today, based on our subject, will be infrastructure development, which cannot be tied or spoken of without tying it with economic development. Now, because Dr. Dlamini is not here, I will engage my 2 panelists on the question that I had for Dr. Dlamini in the presentations that they've prepared. And because of time restrictions, we're going to be a bit more agile. I hope there are no presentations prepared, because that I'm going to eliminate. We're going to have a conversation amongst each other. So I hope in the spirit of being agile, and COVID has taught us that we move with the times. So we really are trying to fight time, and I believe it will be a good engagement. So one of the things that I really wanted to discuss with Dr. Dlamini is how we bring into picture economic development and infrastructure development, and we explain that to a layman. Speaking to the issue of inclusivity, we do not leave anyone behind when we're talking about economic recovery, when we're talking infrastructure development. So, gentlemen, if in your address, opening address, you can discuss how we make sure that it's an inclusive development. I'll hand over first to Mr. Ripulele.
Thank you very much, Duboni, and I think you did a good job in introducing this session. Love the energy. Right. I hope by presentation you meant a PowerPoint presentation and not. All right, perfect. So it's good that I didn't spend most of my time on that. A very good afternoon, everybody. My main topic for today is the meaningful participation of the youth within the built environment. And I've decided to divide the presentation into 3 parts, and starting with the importance of training and upskilling. I want to open with a quote by the Campaign for Education that says, through youth skill development, there will be a sustained move towards self-employment, which constitutes to be an increasingly important element of economic growth and development. Failing to invest in the youth triggers substantial economic, social, and political costs, and negative outcomes such as crime and violence. And I think that's something that's quite evident in our country today. But of course, there should be a strong emphasis as well on future focused skills, which is the direction that young people should be pursuing to make a meaningful impact to an ever-evolving industry. Now, it is clear that there's a significant pipeline of work for those that are willing to innovate, disrupting the way projects are planned, projects are designed, and projects are executed. However, to align with these new ways of working, there is also a need to change the skills, competencies, and culture of the built environment as a sector. What is encouraging to see, however, is the appetite that there is for change, especially from very young people. But organizations will need to think differently, collaborate in new ways, and be more focused about the way they develop and retain talent if they are to remain relevant and competitive. But fortunately, there's a blueprint. The built environment is not the first to go through this. There's a position to learn from industries, for example, such as banking, where digitization has already been reshaped by their own digital transformation. But of course, For something like this to happen, you need a collaboration between generations. Young people and experienced individuals need to collaborate to make this a reality. The skills standard gazetted by Minister Delil requires that all construction projects of grades 7, 8, and 9 should be used as a site for skills and enterprise development, which shows that the government, its heart is in the right place. Now, the onus is on industry to go beyond compliance and just ticking boxes, and intentionally upskilling young professionals and youth-owned companies with the relevant skills, and to have an open mind, which is something that the young lady has said, the lawyer lady. Therefore, enabling them to be relevant in the current and future economies. I just want to, if you can indulge me, play a short 3-minute video of some of the technologies that have been adopted, which are in line with the theme today. Daddy, that's actually his name, it's not my daddy. Yeah. much, Daddy. So the point I want to make there is that the world is changing, right? And our mindset must also change, especially from an economic point of view. Another critical aspect I want to touch on is with voluntary associations. Voluntary associations play a very critical role in allowing the youth to meaningfully participate through youth chapters or youth chambers. These are vehicles that incubate leadership development and provide a platform to influence policy within the built environment. However, I found that most young people do not see the value of these structures and delegate this exercise to others, especially the technically strong and well-experienced young people that can shape forward-thinking policy. What I also find is that VAs normally operate in silos, and of course there are initiatives such as CASA that are making a concerted effort in uniting the voice of industry and in facilitating smooth dialogue within government. But the big question, I guess, is that is there impact, and whether this is assisting with a project of meaningful participation of youth within the built environment. What we know is that VAs are strategic tools to help us achieve these objectives. The key message here is that with people that you mentor, right, and people that seek advice and guidance from you as bearers of industry knowledge, encourage them to join these associations so that they can be more active and expand their reach. Now, lastly, in 2014, a company started by a 19-year-old, which was in 2007, called Facebook, enabled 227 billion of economic impact, creating 4.5 million jobs globally. Now, that's almost 75% of SA's GDP. And we don't have to go far. We have companies such as Batu and Drip Footwear that have, by themselves disrupted the retail industry. And of course, emerging companies that are youth-owned in the built environment that are following the same trajectory. So in closing, my point would be that youth are worth investing in. Investing in youth is investing in infrastructure and investing in the future of this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lediga. So I think in the effort of us having a conversation, I really don't want us to be presenting too much. Let's have a conversation. It's just before lunch. People want us to wake them up a little bit. So, when you think about the infrastructure development space, there's a lot of projects being rolled out. We've got bulk infrastructure, we've got human settlements, we've got energy, all sorts of projects. And one of the most important things are professionals within these spaces. And we have talked about professionalism within the legal fraternity space in the context of construction. But we've seen contractors cutting corners, trying to cut costs and whatever other reasons that may be there. Why do you think it's important, rather, that we have professionals who are firmly rooted and very competent in the rollout of these infrastructure projects? And why is it important also for our professionals to continue upskilling themselves? Because I would imagine, as Refila has shown us, that the world is changing. So we need to make sure that our professionals are also as agile and as competent in these new worlds that we're coming into. So if you could just talk to us about the role of professionalism. I'm putting us in your corner because that's where you are, and you are best to tell us what are some of the best ways to ensure that projects that are being rolled out in a proper way and we don't have issues in the future.
Okay, you've caught me a little bit off guard here because obviously I had prepared something, but in fact what I had prepared was a little bit about the role of the professional in the infrastructure industry and what is actually happening in government at the moment, where there is a lack of experienced professionalism inside all levels of government, right from public service down to local government, including the state-owned enterprises. And obviously that lack of professionalism impacts on the decision-making towards the maintenance, the planning and the maintenance of new infrastructure. And that is missing at the moment. And really what I was going to talk about is the evidence of that shortcoming of professionalism and active experts to mentor and coach and provide the learning towards the younger technicians and technologists that Rafilwe was talking about. And that is completely missing from the public sector and, as I say, state-owned enterprises and local government, and to a certain extent to the private sector as well. And because it's missing, there is no foresight when it comes to the planning and the decision making and the maintenance of infrastructure. And that is evidenced a lot by something that SAICI, that's the institution that I represent, has identified in its infrastructure report card, which we've done over the last sort of 15, 16 years, and we're about to release another one, literally in November of this year, which actually shows the deterioration in most sectors of infrastructure, and it's due to the poor maintenance and poor decision-making of the professionals in the industry. So sure, I mean, absolutely, it's critically important that we maintain the professionalism, but more important is that those professionals are there to guide and mentor and educate the young incoming technicians and technologists and engineers towards professional registration and towards a proper career of specialization. That aspect is missing completely at the moment.
I mean, I think, Rufilo, I'll bring you in here. You are a young person. You are an academic in your own right with your doctoral studies. Given what has been presented, you know, we do see it in some of the projects that have been rolled out, in some of the lack of maintenance and what issues that has brought about. And now with us talking about economic recovery and infrastructure rollout, what do you think are the low-hanging fruit that young people can take advantage of? Some of the things that have been raised. You know, SAICI is one of the most respected organizations, and we look up to organizations such as those and the VAs that you mentioned to ensure that young people are able to take advantage of these low-hanging fruits. So I'd like to hear from you. What do you think are those low-hanging fruits that we can ensure that things start changing within this recovery of South African economy?
Thank you, Kidewoni. You know, because I do research, you start identifying a lot of gaps, right? Especially postgrad research. For example, when we started, you know, doing research on 3D concrete printing, one of the issues were that we can't find a printer in SA or anywhere in Africa. So if we had to have one, we had to import it from overseas, right? And that's why I started this company, and you know, we found that gap. But my point is that there are a lot of those instances, right? And the problem with universities and researchers sometimes is that they are not commercially driven and they're not entrepreneurial. They're research focused. That's their mandate, right? I think if we had a forum where, you know, hardcore researchers can, you know, engage with entrepreneurs, especially the young ones, right? And just have discussion around what they are doing research on, and, you know, maybe the young entrepreneurs could then find ways to commercialize some of these opportunities. And a forum like that, I think, could be very helpful, and I think that's sort of like a sweet spot that's not taken advantage of, and you know, could be an opportunity for young people.
So, Stephen, I feel like there's a bit of a disservice without you having your presentation. But I love the fact that we are talking about some of the things that you were going to raise in your presentation. And I think it is important because we're talking now projects, big projects that are being rolled out currently and that are still coming in addressing, you know, the issues of economy and restructuring our economy and ensuring that these projects are rolled out successfully. So bringing JBCC back into the conversation, you know, we've had a lot of presentations earlier and from our very, very learned friends in terms of what the importance of JBCC and the construction legal side of things are. I wanted to ask you, so looking at, taking into account the JBCC and the future of infrastructure within South Africa, what do you think JBCC should be doing to prepare themselves? And what do you think young people such as civil engineers and other professionals should be doing as well to prepare themselves for the future of infrastructure rollout?
Okay, look, I'm not an expert in JBCC, I must be honest, so you've really put me out on a limb. Obviously, SAICI is the custodian of the general conditions of contract, the GCC. And we're also in the process, just like JBCC has just done, of rolling out a new contract form. The whole idea of that contract form is to take into account the shortcomings that were identified in the previous contract form and adapt the new contract form to suit. You know, I'm really out of my league here. I think I need a bit of help, quite honestly.
I actually did that on purpose because the main idea is to show that how there's so many entities within the built environment that can leverage off one another, but also can benefit from knowing what SAIS is doing versus what JBCC is doing and how those can come into picture. Same thing as Refilwe. It's just to say, listening to what we heard this morning and some of the things that you've picked up over the years, because I think we also want to leverage a lot on your experience, is how can we, from a protection perspective, the reason I'm bringing JBCC in is because we are celebrating the JBCC, so it is important that we keep bringing it back to say this is what we can get value out of the JBCC, but also with these organizations that we have on the panel. What is it that we can do to arm ourselves for the future so we don't have the problems that you raised? These critical problems that you raised that we're seeing right now in the infrastructure space.
I think, let me just come back to what I was, really going to talk about, and that was really, an energy and an effort by all the voluntary associations and the councils to improve the professionalization in the industries that they're involved with, because it's critically important. If you want to see an improvement in the infrastructure rollout, both in big projects and in smaller projects, I mean, look at the experience that's just happened with SANRAL and the 17-point-something billion rands worth of contracts, which were put on hold because of their perception of maladministration in the way these contracts were awarded. And in fact, SAIS, along with CESA, I'm not sure if Chris Campbell is still there, I don't see him anymore. We were called in to sort of offer advice on how these contracts should be adjudicated and what are the steps to be followed to actually award them expeditiously. And that is a lack of understanding of how these contracts work and the roles of the engineers and the professionals and the lawyers, etc., inside the industry space. And there is a lot of educating to be doing. And I think this was the aim of what I was going to talk about, is the necessity for the bodies that are here, the councils and the voluntary associations, a lot of whom are represented here, to actually go about lifting the level of professionalism. And along with that is the education of the young engineers and technicians and technologists in that space, because they are not being properly mentored, because there are no seniors left in the space to actually mentor them. So there is a shortfall there, and that was really the issue of what I was going to refer to, is actually utilizing our local professionals, not bringing in Cubans, etc., utilizing our local professionals to actually educate and mentor the younger professionals. How else is this industry ever going to go forward and grow unless we develop a core of professionals in all walks of the industry, especially the infrastructure space? If this country is ever going to have a renewal in the infrastructure space, it's going to be done through professionalism of that industry, a proper mentoring, career development program that's put in place and that we can take to the future, so that we see an improvement of the quality of the infrastructure identified through the grades of our infrastructure report card, which at the moment are on the decline, and the only way they're going to go up and change directions is through that professionalism and through that integration of educating and mentoring and actually developing that core. Sorry, I'm repeating myself, but you caught me completely unprepared. Okay, thanks.
I think that was the spirit of it. I mean, with time constraints and everything we're facing, we really wanted to be agile. But I'm really loving what you're presenting, because it ties back to the previous panel's discussion in terms of making sure that the right skills are in place, making sure that we do things the right way, which is really what you're addressing right now. Without even your presentation, you're doing that very well. And I mean, I wanted to bring it back to you quickly, just to say, so you have given, I'm a practical person, and you've given us the problems and you touched on the solutions. Refilwe mentioned the higher grade contractors in terms of what they can do. I would like to ask you, and I know you've touched on it, maybe just in a bit more depth, so that we have those tangible solutions that we can say this is what we can do, especially given the fact that we are, billions of rands have started to be rolled out in some of these infrastructure projects. So what are some of the tangible ways that we can ensure that there is that rollout of mentorship, actually not even mentorship, that skills transfer does take place, that professionalism does take place on a practical level?
The only way this is going to happen is to create an awareness in the public service and the state-owned enterprises and obviously in private sector, you know, of the need to professionalize, to understand who are the decision makers, who are the best people to make those decisions. And that's a really slow process. It's something that we've allowed to be eroded over the last probably 50 years, where, you know, originally the decision making in all infrastructure matters was made by, you know, technically capable people, whereas now it's being made by politicians for the most part. And a lot of decisions made by politicians are obviously done for their own agendas towards the political gain. You know, what's the sexiest thing to do? What's going to get the best vote in the next elections? And that is very seldom in the interests of our ailing infrastructure. So we have to change that mindset. And honestly, it's a really slow process. It's not just through contract documentation. It's through creating an awareness of what engineers and technical people, architects, quantity surveyors, and everybody else in the CBE, you know, are capable of doing and what their role actually is. And I think what I was going to say is that it's really a call upon every single professional council and voluntary association under the CBE to actually start, or not start, but to continue to actually create that awareness. And that's what's missing. And honestly, there's no easy fix here. This is something that's eroded over the last 50 years, and it's probably going to take another 50 years to put it back. But if we don't start doing it, if we don't, and I wanted to quote Chris Campbell when I was going to talk, and that is that we want a seat at the table and not just be on the menu. I think technical people, and it's a perfect statement because that's exactly what it is. You know, unless the technical people, the technocrats, get a seat at the table and start making the decisions, especially when it comes to infrastructure development, we will always just be on the menu. In other words, we just get, you know, engaged when there's a problem, when there's something wrong. And that's exactly what's happening with the technocrats. You know, we just get called in when there's something wrong. And unless we change that perception, our ailing infrastructure is going to continue to ail, and that's the sad truth. So that's my appeal, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, it brings me nicely into my question to Refilwe. So, you know, young people and persons with disability are often on the outside of this conversation. And I mean, I'm looking at the panel, the previous panel. We don't have women as panelists. This is the first one where we've got a young person as a panelist. So I wanted to find out from you, Refilwe, and I mean, taking from what Sida's also shared. In terms of, oh, welcome. Talking specifically about, you know, having a seat at the table. And we're talking now from a planning perspective before the problems arise, before the project even starts. How do we make sure that we integrate and ensure, and I'll bring it back to what I said earlier, making sure that this is an inclusive development, including the youth, including the persons with disability, and including women in the conversation, not as an item on the menu, but at the seat on the table.
Thanks, Gilwani. You know, one thing I've learned about, you know, things like mentorship and learning from the more experienced is that there are only a few people that, you know, have that, you know, loosely speaking, heart to do that, you know. I find it that a lot of young people need to be proactive and fight to be in that position, right? And, you know, in line with my earlier point, that I found voluntary association quite strategic as well in attaining and influencing policy, that they are not only, they are forced to do it, you know, to put it simply, that they're forced to mentor and then transfer these skills as well. But I think another thing, Gidiboni, with regards to economic opportunities, government plays a very critical part, but then I find that sometimes we're too reliant on government. You know, I spoke about Facebook, I spoke about Drip, I spoke about Batu and other companies. These companies built this without any government intervention, you know, at least when they started and so forth. So I think just that mind shift as well, to say that, look, I need to have a strong value proposition, I have to build a very strong business case, and I honestly don't need government to do that.
All right. I think also that's a very important mindset to have, that we also have our role to play. As government, they have their role, but also us as young people, as women, as business, we also have a role to play. Dr. Dlamini, so we have sort of moved with the times. We understand that, you know, there are other things that can hold up a person, but I'm going to put you in the hot seat just as you arrived. So we are talking squarely on economic development, you know, recovery in the infrastructure space. And the question I wanted to ask you was, you know, if you were to meet a layman on the street, how would you explain economic development and the synergy between economic development and infrastructure development?
Okay, thank you very much, and apologies. I thought that my slot starts at 12:30. So, yeah. Well, look, as far as economic development is concerned, it's not just about, you know, growth in GDP, but it's about the upliftment of the standards of people's lives on the ground. And in as far as that is concerned, where construction then comes in, is that the major trigger or the major contributor to the growth equation is the provision of infrastructure, which is where construction plays a major role. Because if you look at most economies across the globe, construction contributes about 10% to growth in all economies. And when we are looking at the provision of infrastructure, gross fixed capital formation constitutes about 50% of the economy. So in that respect, you can see then that really, if we can invest as a country more effort into infrastructure development, we can trigger a lot of overall economic activity, which will then take the country forward.
Therefore, in other words, as a layman, infrastructure development equals money, basically. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's a factor amongst other issues, because without the requisite infrastructure, there's nothing that attracts other investments. So by providing the most basic infrastructure like your roads, water and sanitation, and making sure that that infrastructure is up to scratch, it then triggers other investments into those areas where such good infrastructure exists. And then you find that there's lots of economic activity at the end of the day.
I think we're aligned in that. In the opening statement, I did say that through infrastructure development, we're able to attract investment, we're able to attract growth, economic stimulation, you know, so there's a ripple effect in investing in infrastructure development. I think you'll agree with me in that regard.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Before we open the floor to questions, I just want to find out from our panel if there is some parting shot that you want to share, a 2-minute quick shot.
I think just following on what the doctor said, you know, it is critical that we get the roads and the rail and all that other infrastructure going. But in fact, the decision-making process by National Treasury to actually allocate the budgets and award those contracts has been a challenge. I mean, it really has. We find quite often annually that these organizations and the municipalities actually underspend on the actual budget allocated. And that's purely because of poor decision-making or the inability to actually make that decision in the first place. And there again comes because it's a lack of understanding of the process and the importance and the priority of that particular bit of infrastructure.
Thank you very much. Planning is really important, and how we go about planning is really important to ensure that we don't have the issues that we're facing, particularly with the fact that we are rolling out mass infrastructure in addressing some of the economic issues we're facing. Mr. Lediga?
Thank you, Kiriboni. I just think that we are not upskilling at the pace that we should be upskilling, right? If you look at what, especially the Western countries are doing, we're far behind. You know, I think it's something that we normally speak about, but is really implemented aggressively. So I just say that it's very important, you know, and as an industry, because the industry people here, to really take it very seriously and just to ensure that we stay relevant and competitive with the world. Thank you.
And again, you know, it ties back to what Steve was also saying, that in upskilling and skilling and getting in touch with the times brings in that professionalism and that adequate planning for the future, because now we're looking at how do we address future infrastructure projects with adequate skills, adequate professionalism, and taking everybody with us on this journey. Any parting shot from you? I know you, you just joined the conversation, but I'm sure there is something you'd like to say in us closing the conversation.
Yeah, look, maybe what one can say is going forward, maybe just taking off from the last line that you said, the kind of infrastructure that will be required for the future is different, because the future that we are going into is different. And I think you will agree with me, looking at the most recent disasters that we have had. We have had floods that we have never seen in the last 100 years in KZN early this year. And that tells you that the kind of infrastructure that we currently have, we need to start rethinking in terms of what kind of infrastructure would be ideal for the future that we are going into. And that is the challenge, I think, that in the construction fraternity we need to be assist with going forward, which is an opportunity, by the way. It's not a challenge. It's an opportunity, because what it means is we need to be more innovative, more creative, and look at alternative methods of how we build, we design and create the infrastructure that we build for the future. And by doing so, I'm sure that there'll be more jobs that will be created, and we will see more growth in the economy. Thank you.
Don't you just appreciate this panel? I mean, you did not have your slides, but you managed to get your correct points across. Refilwe was thrown in the deep end in terms of some of the questions, and the doctor was late, but he actually addressed some of the things we spoke of earlier. It's as if he were here with us. So it shows that the right panel was selected for this conversation, and we are really moving towards the same direction in terms of where we're taking South African infrastructure. So I would like to open up the floor for questions and comments if there are any. Thank you, Michael.
Can I go? Cool. Thanks very much, everybody. Refilwe, I just wanted to, and I thought, you know, those ideas that you've shown, you know, innovation is awesome and it's great, but I think we also need to try and look in the backdrop of our country with so much unemployment, so much lack of skills and whatever, and most of those innovations are almost replacing people's jobs. So I'm not knocking you. I'm trying to say, how do we actually benefit from both? How do we take advantage of these innovative ways of doing things that are better and less difficult for people? And then also, how do we address the massive issue of unemployment and unskilled people? Because that's our biggest problem. I mean, I think on the other side, and I'm not only saying a whole speech, but all of these things, so if the economy is down, there are no projects. And then the companies and the professionals and all of those things are suffering because people can't stay in the industry because there's no work. And I mean, if you talk to consultants, they're giving more discounts, scrambling for jobs, and they're struggling. So these things are actually, in a way, cyclical because, I mean, it all stems back to the economic conditions. So yeah. I mean, and one other question, just in terms of monitoring number of qualified professionals in the industry, I'm pretty sure if we look 20 years ago, how many actual proper qualified professionals there were compared to what is left now, you'll have a heart attack. So I think those sorts of things need to be almost measured and checked. And, you know, on one side, we're talking about a lot of experience needed to administer JBCC and do our job properly, but we're also talking about youth. And there's no quick bridging gap. You actually need to go through a process. So it's almost to have a professional qualification to become a principal agent. Maybe something to be considered. Or anyway, thanks. Lots of questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I'm not asking you questions. These are just merely comments. Apologies. My name is Lerato Mwamoka. I'm from the National Youth Development Agency, and I'm the member of the Black Business Council in the Build Environment Youth Chamber. Okay, my comment is that understanding that there's a shortfall of skilled people and technicians, and I mean there's a lot of Refilwe, you mentioned that a lot of young people are not interested in VAs, but I believe that the biggest problem we have with VAs is that they are not interacting with youth, especially in institutions of higher learning. And if they are usually in institutions that are historically white and not black or newly founded institutions. So that's also one of the problems that bring about the issue of access to volunteering for these institutions, or people even knowing that these VAs do exist. I think I'm part of a technical team I'm working with the Department of Public Works, and they've just launched a student chapter forum, sort of, and they're targeting students to assist them in terms of mentorship, so forth and so on. So one of the reasons why this was founded by the Department of Public Works and the University of Johannesburg was that the gap or the gap between the VAs and institutions of higher learning is becoming worse, and it becomes impossible for a young person to go out there and say that there's this and there's a certain institution that exists that can assist me with my career development or my academic development in this particular sector. But one of the most important reasons that was brought up was that if you're in the law fraternity, you already know that for you to get a professional, to become an advocate, an attorney, a qualified attorney, or to be admitted as one, you're supposed to go through certain processes. But in our sector, we do not have, it's not set out to be like that. So I get my degree and I already consider myself a quantity surveyor. I don't go further, and that is cost. I think the responsibility actually lies with the VAs and also the councils that allows for aspirant professionals to actually acquire those things. But more so, I believe we've got a lot of professionals in here. And if I were to ask how many young people or how many people are they mentoring, I'm not sure what the answer would be, but I believe I'd be very disappointed. So that's also one of the things. So I'm also saying they can register on our portal. I'll share the link, and that's where they'll be able to get students or members of the charter to mentor, and then maybe we can move from there in terms of mentorship. And this also addresses your intergenerational question of saying that there is no link or shift or transfer of skills in terms of skills in the construction sector. I'm so bad at expressing myself.
Thank you very much, moderator. This time my name is Guilhem Teto, and I'm the CEO of NTT Holdings and the Deputy President of the Black Business Council in the Built Environment. I've got just 2 questions to the panel. I don't know who was going to answer. Maybe the first one can be answered by the good doctor. This is with regards to the registration, successful registration of our graduates as candidates and also as PR. We find that we've got a very great output, especially of women, young women that are graduating. But when it comes to the stats, we've got very few that end up being seriously PRs. Can you share with us what is the problem and what is it that the sector needs to do to support them so that they can be able to become PRs eventually? And then the second question goes to everybody who's sitting in front there, that we've got still the triple problems that are facing South Africa, which are unemployment, poverty, and inequality. And much as there is a lot of appetite towards the innovation, we still are a third world country, that is for sure. But on the other hand, we've got a duty to grow as a country and become relevant. Therefore, for me, the innovation in fourth IR, the new ways of doing business are actually quite critical, especially in the age of the people that we are raising, the young ones, who are more technologically inclined than they are labor inclined. How then can we streamline a working relationship within the infrastructure development whereby you have got your professionals that are right at the beginning from concept to your contractors that are actually doing the job, and then you've got the actual artisans that we have so much forgotten about as a country, especially post-94. We have really not been able to produce good quality artisans. How can we streamline the working relationships across the board and other supply value chain players within the so that at least the infrastructure that is talking to the future that needs to be built is relevant, is sustainable, and it can still be able to be maintained by the young people that will have developed. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I'll do is the two questions, one will go to the doctor, then the other one I'd like you to address, please. The last question by Ms. Mteto. I think, Refilwe, you've got your fair share of questions and comments. I'll hand over to Refilwe, the doctor, and then Stephen.
Thank you very much. I just forgot the gentleman's name. I don't think. Yeah, so that's why. Marty. Marty. Yeah, I think it's a very important question, of course, in the context of South Africa. But what was interesting when we, were 3D printing a 40 square meter house was that we actually needed more labor on site. I think the misconception is that as soon as you see a robotic arm, an automated system, that means that you just labor on site. Of course, we did not need bricklayers, right? We needed somebody who understands software. We needed somebody who understands how to program hardware, and somebody who understands concrete technology. But we also needed support staff, wheelbarrows, concrete mixing, and so forth. So from that case study, there was actually there were no jobs lost net. Actually, one or two more were created, right? And that's what we normally don't see when these things are presented. But another interesting aspect is that because it's sort of specialized, what we started seeing is that we started getting requests from overseas for us to train them on the system, right? So it allowed us to import the skill to international countries and so forth. And I think there's also value there, right, in terms of getting, I guess, business from outside and bring it in the country. So I just wanted to speak on those 2 points shortly, just to respond to that question.
No, thank you very much. Maybe before I come to your question, Ms. Mteto, I would also like to just weigh on 2 points from what Martin was talking about in terms of how do we make sure that we deal with the unemployment situation. We're actually in a crisis in as far as employment is concerned. Now, in the 1930s, most of you would know about John Mark Keynes. He was an economist. He says, and that was after the recession, by the way, following the First World War. His argument was, when there's issues of unemployment, government has got a responsibility to come in. And then he said, government must actually pay people to dig holes and fill them up. And then other economists argued, but why would you waste resources in digging holes? Why can't you get them to build roads or schools or whatever? And then he says, yeah, go ahead and do that. But the point that he was trying to hammer home was that for as long as there is economic activity, government can print as much money that they want, especially in South Africa because we've got a sovereign currency. Don't buy this thought that, no, if you print a lot of money as government, there will be inflation issues. Yes, if there is no economic activity. But if you've got economic activity that will match the money that you pay people, then that will lead to more and more economic activity. And then you'll deal with the employment issue. In South Africa, it's even more because we are still talking about communities that in the past were disregarded in terms of provision of infrastructure. So we've got lots and lots of potential to actually see more and more growth in the South African economy and make sure that we pull all the people that are in the streets of Johannesburg and get them to work. In building this infrastructure, we give them the necessary skills and we make sure that everybody is active. There's nobody that's just sitting home doing nothing. And then we will address the issue of unemployment. Coming to the issue of skills, I think you touched on that, Martin. I think it also fits perfectly with what Ms. Mteto was also asking. Now, the issue of skills, our approach should be to look at the whole value chain in terms of where are the gaps, where are the cracks. Because we see a lot of registrations, for instance, in first-year students, especially in the built environment schools. But if you look at the throughput, currently we are sitting at about 30% throughput in the built environment schools. Where is the 70%? What happens to the 70% that register for first year in the built environment schools? And this is a problem. Some of us who've been through the system, we know where the problems are. I started when I studied my first diploma was in architecture. We started in a class of 36. Only 4 of us managed to finish, and those 32 people that didn't make it through, they didn't make it through because they were stupid. The system was such that it was impossible for them to finish their studies. And those hurdles are still there. And we know that they are there. What are we doing about it? So those are the things that we need to be dealing with as a country. And then coming to what happens to the graduates that we see, especially women. Again, we need to pay attention to the whole value chain. Lots of people, once they graduate, as a result of the unemployment issue again, they find it very difficult to get the requisite experience that will enable them to register as professionals. And what is government doing about that? We need to be paying attention to that. And I'm sure if we we invest in addressing the infrastructure issues of this country holistically, we can create enough jobs that will enable every built environment graduate to be absorbed in the infra. And we must follow through, have monitoring systems to follow through to ensure that all our graduates get absorbed in the industry. Nobody ends up elsewhere in a different sector of the economy. If they have studied either architecture or civil engineering, they must go and be absorbed in the civil engineering sector. And by so doing, we will make sure that there is progress. And also the issue of making sure that our institutions are transformed, because there has been lots of barriers in these councils, the professional councils, that make it so difficult for people that come from previously disadvantaged backgrounds to get to a point where they can register as professionals. And this starts from the university. I ended up going to study at Technicon, not because of my choice, but all the traditional universities rejected me. And once you graduate with a diploma, you cannot register as a professional architect. You'll register as a draftsperson or as a technologist. And for you to climb up the ladder to be able to register as a professional architect, it's a nightmare. There's lots of hurdles that have been put in place, and we are aware of these hurdles. What are we doing about them? So my argument is that it's about time, and we don't need much. The regulations, the legislation that establishes this council, it's powerful enough. It's got the sufficient teeth that if we apply it effectively, we can turn things around and make sure that the current situation where we have got about 62% of professionally registered people being white people in a country where about 90% of the population is black. That's ridiculous. We should be ashamed of ourselves that 28 years into democracy, we still can't turn the tide in as far as that situation is concerned.
Doctor, thank you. Thank you.
I thank you.
We hear the passion in you, and I think it'll take another conversation, but very, very critical elements were raised there. Stephen, after you.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I want to tackle on. Sorry, I didn't catch your name. Larato. You're a quantity surveyor, is that right? Yeah. I find it disappointing that you feel that there's such a huge disconnect between student quantity surveyors and the Voluntary Association for Quantity Surveyors and your professional council for quantity surveyors. Because as Rafielwe knows as well, in civil engineering, the picture is very different. We have a very aggressive program to develop student chapters in all the universities, in the universities of technology as well. And those student chapters are incredibly active. And then when they graduate, we enroll them in mentorship programs. I mean, you asked who's mentoring. I'm mentoring. I've got 4 or 5 mentees. Sorry, I'm the mentor. Let's not get it the wrong way around. And we've got a whole program of that. So it's happening. Our voluntary association is very committed to the enveloping, if that's the right word, to be part of the family of the young graduates, to become, part of the family of the institution, and then ultimately work towards professional registration, as engineers, technicians, and technologists. So we work hard at that. And it starts at the universities. But actually, to be true, and to answer the question of the doctor, there is still an imbalance in the transformation, but it starts at school. In fact, it even starts younger than that. There has to be the incentive or the want of the black community to actually go into the sort of technical engineering, technician and technologist environment. And I think that's still falling short. And I think part of the problem is that it's very hard to motivate people to get into engineering when there is so much unemployment afterwards. I mean, I address universities, and I'll say to university students in their sort of 4th year, you guys, you've chosen the best career, you haven't made a mistake, and I'm telling you, you'll never look back. And then in the back of my mind, I think, geez, you're basically not even being truthful, because you're actually encouraging them to sort of stay within the profession that they've chosen, and they will never look back. But actually, the ultimate truth is a lot of them won't find jobs when they graduate. And I sort of think to myself, am I misrepresenting the situation? And that's the honest thing. And unless there is a big turnaround in the economy and the stimulation of infrastructure, the building of infrastructure and the creation of employment at all levels, using Rafielwe's 4D and high technology, but just all aspects of economic development, especially in infrastructure, only then will the employment change, and only then will it become the attractive profession that we are trying to aim for. That will attract more of the black community, more women into it. I mean, right now, I don't think it's that attractive, and that's part of the problem. I'm not saying it's the whole problem, it's part of the problem. Okay, sorry, there was... yeah, okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm just trying to think of what the other questions were.
It was about creating a streamlined relationship between the consultants, the contractors, the artisans, and the rest of the value chain players.
Streamlined communication. I suppose that happens through the councils and the voluntary associations. I'm not quite sure what you're getting at there in that question. Where do you think that the gap in the streamlining is?
Now I'm asking, how do you do that? Because currently we're talking about the infrastructure rollout, but it's up to so much money. And we are also talking parallel to that about, I've got the book. No, I'm saying that currently we are talking about the infrastructure rollout that are currently happening. Yes. And we're also talking about the challenges that speak to the infrastructure development. Now, one of the things that I've noted is that there is still silo operation, not only between your government and your private sector, but there's also silo operations within the role players. Because you've got the professionals, but now, even if the professional, the architect can bring the most beautiful architect, and the engineer supports that, and there's a project manager to support that, without a good contractor, it's a problem. And if the contractor is not good enough because of the artisans that we are not having a good supply of, it's a problem. So we'll end up with wasteful expenditure as it usually is happening currently. So how then can we find a common ground or streamline a better working relationship between all those role players?
Yeah, I think probably, has this thing gone off? No, this one's working. I think probably the best person to answer that kind of question is somebody from the CIDB, and I'm not sure if we've got anybody from the CIDB here. They're coming later. Yeah, I think the role of the CIDB is obviously to create that that register of contractors and consultants at all different levels to make sure that there is an alignment, of the level of consulting and the level of contracting to the type of project that it is, to make sure that there isn't that misalignment that you talk about. And I think they will talk about that and a lot more. As far as the TVETs are going, there are plenty of TVETs out there which are churning out artisans. But the frustration that I find, and I think, and that's where they are, it's the same as young graduates coming out of universities. If the TVETs don't get gainfully employed afterwards, they don't gain that experience, and then they become unqualified and inexperienced. And it's you need the work to get the experience, and you obviously need the experience to get the work. It's a bit of a catch-22 situation. And it all comes back to the stimulation of the economy. I think if the economy is stimulated, there will be the projects, and there will be the training opportunities, and there will be the seniors to train and mentor the juniors. And that's the way it goes. At the moment, there's a huge gap in that. And I think it's really because, for the last few years, this country has really, the infrastructure growth and the infrastructure projects has been in such a doldrums that it's actually pretty much ruined the profession, at all levels, through the consultants right down to the contractors. And that needs the change. That's my feeling anyway.
Thank you so much to everyone. I think similar to the previous conversation, there isn't enough time to discuss such matters, but I thank the panelists for your indulgence and for your expertise, and I think our future is in good hands, but there's a lot of work to be done. Thank you once again.
A photo shoot, please. Shaiman. Oza Shebe. Oza. Shaiman.
do this again.
Please. A warm round of applause for our panelists and our vivacious Kiriboni. Thank you so much. It actually, as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking that the JBCC Board of Directors has got a very big task ahead of us, because it means that even the contracts that we're going to be developing and drafting going forward, and I'm glad that there's drafting team members that are available today, needs to look at the future skills, needs to look at the future ways of doing business, so that we don't draft contracts today that are going to be irrelevant for tomorrow. So we've got to take that futuristic thinking ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having been there and engaging. I'm enjoying all of these discussions. I so wish that we could have more time, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to convince our marketing chair that we need to have more sessions, whether we have it virtually or we have it physically. I've already coerced, by the way, the Minister of Human Settlements for another session, closed session, where we can be able to sit down with her and provide her with the solution that she so much needs. Problem is that we find ourselves having abandoned our responsibility to the politicians. Somebody earlier said so. And we're giving something to people that don't even know what to do with the power that they've been given. And we stand back with the red pen, just ticking the reds and the wrongs and all of that. So the time has come for us to really, really invest in the crafts that we have, in the country that we so much love, but above all, in the future for our children. Because whether it's black or white, green or yellow, the future is in the hands of the youth. We're sitting here, we're talking about skills development. We're sitting here talking about unemployment. We're sitting here talking about poverty. Whether we want it or not, they affect us directly or indirectly. And for as long as we've got the triple problems of the South African country, the people that are able to make it are not going to be able to enjoy their lives. We are sitting on top of a ticking time bomb, and it's about time that we face the reality. I believe that together we'll be able to provide the solutions if we commit to it. With those words, I would just like to allow us to go and take a very nice medium to well, short to long kind of a break. We're supposed to leave for lunch. We're supposed to break for lunch at 1 o'clock and come back at 2. I'm going to plead with you to please be back at least 14:15, 2:15, so that we can be able to continue. And I know that most of the time at such conferences, after the break, lunch break, people disappear. We need you to come back because we need to finalize our program and finalize these discussions. They are very important to set the tone of the future of the built environment. So ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy your lunch. Bon appetit. The food has been already prayed for. Thank you. I'll see you at 2:15.